We're good to go? All right. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It is my privilege and honor to serve on Wichita City Council representing District 2. I'm Becky Tuttle, and this is the District Advisory Board meeting for Monday, February 12th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. It is in person, and if anyone joins us also online, but right now we have a quorum. We have 7 awesome District Advisory Board members here in person, so I'm super excited. We have an interesting agenda tonight. We don't have some of our normal agenda items, but we're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing that we like to do is everyone introduce themselves. And in District 2, we like to introduce yourself, what neighborhood or HOA you're representing, and your favorite thing about Wichita, and you can't repeat something that somebody else said. So this time, I'm gonna give Teresa the luxury of starting, because I always have her go last.
Oh. Usually going first. Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Beasy. I'm the Community Services Representative. And the one thing I love about Wichita is that it's only 3 hours away from Kansas City in case I want to go up and see the parade on Wednesday.
Oh, very good.
Hi, Jim Groff, and with the Veteran Estate Homeowner Association, Area 127th area. And let's see, it's all the, I'll beat some of this, it always seems like it comes up, but some of the fine dining restaurants and opportunity experience of eating out in this city continues to be great.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer McDonald, and I represent the Dublin Port area. It's like 29th and Lockish. And
I'm gonna start calling it that.
and my favorite thing about Wichita is all of the educational opportunities that we have for kids, and we have so many universities with WSU. We have WSU Tech. You could go to Butler. I could go on and on with Newman and Friends, but I just feel like there's so many great educational opportunities here in our city.
I'll tell you what mine is, just because I want to point of privilege if I can. So mine is all of the arts and cultural activities that we have in Wichita. I'm a huge advocate for the arts, the visual and performing, because I have no talent of my own. So anybody who will share any talent with me, no, it's true. And so Saturday, I'm on the Arts Council Board of Directors, but Saturday, I also serve on the City Arts Advisory Board, and they're starting a new program called Arts Spark, where they have someone read a book and then go into one of their rooms and then do a craft project or an art project based on the book. Because there's a lot of research that if you read something to a kiddo, but then there's also something tactile, they're more likely to retain the information. So I read When Pegaso Met Booties. So it was great. And then we went and did our very own self-portraits in Picasso style, and it's hanging in my office proudly. But one thing to also just promote, we just did our arts and economic impact study for the city of Wichita. Amazing progress. We showed that the arts in Wichita from the non-for-profit sector is $180 million annual industry. 189 million, with almost 3,000 full-time job equivalent. And so the Americans for the Arts is going to be here at the end of the month, and there's going to be a community gathering on February 27th. And they're going to brag about Wichita and our great art system here. And we know that arts not only attracts and retains talent, but also business and industry. So lots of great things going on in Wichita in arts and cultural arts.
My name is Faith Martin. I represent East Ridge Neighborhood Association between Perry and Kellogg and Rock to Woodlawn. And my favorite thing right now is John at Parks, because he got us back into Boston Park, and we have not met there in years and years. And I'm really excited to be able to use the community center for our legal meetings. So thank you, John.
Is John with us tonight, Teresa?
Not yet.
Oh, well, he missed it.
Yeah, I'll relate to it, but I'm gonna tell you, he sent me the 960 million.
It's recorded.
He's just a great.
Yeah, he's an amazing person.
I'm Sam Lindeman. I represent the Bonnie Bray Homeowners Association
Also on Rockish.
on Rockies also, which had an accident as I was driving by, a Rockies type accident. And my best favorite thing about Wichita, last month I mentioned our physicians, medical petitions we had here, because my wife had a procedure done that can't do very often, very many places in the United States, and we can do it right here in Wichita. But kind of related to that, we're also very lucky to have some great medical facilities around all over the town, so a lot of people just don't have it, so we're lucky.
Tracy Adams, I represent the Harrison Park community. And I would like to say that what I love about Wichita today is the opportunity for all of the community engagement such as opportunities like this. I think that the city does a great job at opening their doors and ears to hearing from the community and making it available for all of anyone that wants to be heard to be heard.
Chris Broderick, Northbrook HOA near 37th and Woodlawn. And I was gonna say something about arts and kids opportunities, because my son is in the Nemo show coming up for here in Wichita. So you guys wanna go see that?
Shameless plug.
I know, but since you guys took that one, I'll say the YMCA's. I travel for work a lot. Haven't been the one on your, the quality of ours, your run cities, so
Best YMCs in the
our
nation.
lives here are very nice.
Good.
Sean Baker, Pine Meadows, and I like the locally owned coffee shops.
Oh, nobody said that in a while. Good on you. All right, Teresa, do we, no one online, correct?
Well, Officer Goodley.
But I mean, not for that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we will go ahead to the next item, which is approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting, February 12th, 2024. Hope everyone has had a chance to review it. I would entertain a motion to approve. Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Faith. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
I
opposed?
abstain.
You'll abstain. Well, this is approval of the agenda.
Oh, Jenny, okay.
Yeah, you're good. You're okay with it?
I'm just trying to be on board here.
All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Fantastic. Thank you. Passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is approval from the minutes from January 10th of 2024. As always, Teresa did a great job with the minutes. Thank you so much for your diligence. You sent them out. If anybody doesn't have any changes or recommendations, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Jennifer. A second? Faith is on the second roll today. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone like to abstain?
Aye.
So John and Tracy will abstain. Hello, welcome. Never apology. Would you like to introduce yourself? What neighborhood you represent or homeowners association and your favorite thing about which?
Sure, my name is Stephanie McCurdy, District 2, obviously, and I live in the Hawthorne subdivision.
And your favorite thing?
My favorite thing,
Your favorite thing about
today. Oh, did anyone else have the Chiefs?
Good.
No,
one.
they didn't.
The Chiefs.
What? Who is this? The Chiefs, you speak up. All right, we will keep proceeding. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to speak to an item that isn't on the agenda? Came here to let us know something about the community. All right, we'll keep moving along then. We will go to staff reports. We have Officer Finley with us. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I finally was able to get it on. I was having trouble with my computer.
Awesome, glad you're with us. You want to let
How
us
did we-
introduce yourself, what your job is with Wichita Police Department and your favorite thing about Wichita?
Oh, boy. All right. I'm Officer Thomas Grinley. I work out of Patrol North, part of community policing. Normally, my area is actually in DAB 1, but I have this little tiny sliver of DAB 2, so I'm going to join this meeting as well.
Thank you.
My favorite thing about Wichita. Oh boy, the weather was wonderful today, but I really hope that we get a lot of snow.
Our Public Works Department would also like a lot of snow, so we can get out of the drought, so,
Yes.
right, Paul?
Yes.
Well, my wife wanted to go garage sailing this last summer, and the first place we went, they had a snowblower for sale. And so I bought it because I'm either not gonna get any snow or we're gonna get a lot of snow. And I'm hoping we get a lot of snow because it's fun to use. As for kind of some activities that are going on, our our robberies are up quite a bit. They're robberies from person. The majority of those are actually, two of them were domestic violence related. And one of them, the suspect was caught immediately. And in all three cases, for this last month, all three cases were known suspects to the victims. So that's good. We were able to clear those pretty fast, and there was no real concern from the neighborhood anyway. Our larcenies are up, of course, are actually down. I'm sorry, I apologize. They're actually down for the last month over the month prior. Obviously, part of that has to do with Christmas was the month prior. And so once those are finally coming down, which is wonderful. Our auto thefts are up just a little bit. Part of that has to do with there's some issues with Kia vehicles themselves. And so people are still trying to get those taken care of. I know Kia's done some recalls on some of their motors or some of their automobiles to have people come in and get the ignitions switched over and get a computer update on those. That should take care of most of those. Like I said, I have just a tiny little sliver of Deb too. So if you guys have any questions, I'll try to answer them for you.
Any questions for the district advisory board members? Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Please be safe and let us know if there's anything we can do to support you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
your
Have
time,
a good
guys.
evening. Go find your snow blower. All right, fire.
Good evening, council and Tuttle and board members,
Just
citizens. Colby Robertson, Wichita Fire Department. I am currently the acting battalion chief for Battalion 3, which is the Eastern 3rd Wichita. Been with the department almost 27 years now.
Oh, thank you for your service,
Appreciate that, thank you. I don't have a whole lot for you.
which is good news.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, and this we probably talk about at the next meeting, there's been another fatality fire on February 1st. 505 Oak Rock, but info still coming in, so I'll probably talk about that. I'll leave this paperwork with Miss Beasy. Sedgwick County is offering a new app for citizens of Sedgwick County. It's called Civic Ready. It's a free app. You can sign up through whoever your app provider, your phone provider is, through their app store. And what it does is you get community bulletins, emergency alerts, or severe weather warnings that could directly affect you. There's info on how to do that in here. I have it on my phone. It's a really handy item. So I would encourage anyone that would like to sign up for that. And since last time I saw you folks, Wichita has total hours company training since December of 2023 of 1,243 hours. We have 79 total hours of company training at the Regional Training Center. On January 19th, we graduated our newest recruit class that had 11 young men in it, finished a 14-week program teaching them how to be Wichita firemen. Focus training for beginning of this year, incident command for officers and acting officers. Preparations are underway for a 2024 captain and lieutenant promotional process, which is March 6th, I believe, is the written test. Focusing on cold weather operations, including ice rescue this month. And we've got a new software implementation for record management system that we're all trying to learn. That's the better part of my day today, trying to learn. Computers and I don't get along with. Support services projects that are underway are implementing that new RMS, finalizing a design for a new storage facility at 31st and Oliver, where our regional training center is. They demobilized Fire Station 23, which was a temporary firehouse due to the Hampton Bridge project. It closed on January 3rd of this year, and we reallocated those resources to other places in the city. We have 4 new battalion chief cars. Four new battalion chief vehicles, some command staff vehicles. Just last week, we got 2 new engines and a new truck that will go on track here within a month. And I believe that is it. Wichita Fire won Battle of the Badges for the 3rd year in a row. So,
Thanks for counting.
yes, and that's all I have for it, unless you have questions.
Any questions? I did get to go to the ceremony, the graduation ceremony, and it was just exciting. Yeah, so it was exciting to see them, and they're just so proud and
They're
so ready
excited.
to serve.
We got one of them in our battalion. He's really good now, so
That's
it's
awesome.
exciting.
Thank you for training them and taking
You
care of them
bet,
so they're
you
ready to
bet.
serve.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
thank you for your service. Be safe.
Appreciate that.
No parking lot, no library. That's unusual. Paul, Public Works. So, Paul, the city engineer for the city of Wichita.
Yes.
And Mr. Paul, what might be your favorite thing about Wichita?
You know, I.
Besides District 2.
There's a lot of common things that I was gonna mention, but I'm going to say that people. Wichita, we had some unfortunate things happen at the house here in the last couple of weeks, and the most recent thing was the sewer backup outside, so. Had a contractor come out Friday and fix that, and he did a good job, he talked through it all, what was wrong, he had an apprentice with him, and I think he walked him through the process as well, so educating, and it was all good, so.
Did you call your boss the director of Public Works? I'm in Public Works.
But they'll get it temporarily fixed for now, and they'll come back out and we'll be able to do it.
And you had a pipe burst in the cold weather.
I had a pipe burst.
Don't buy a lot of new balls.
So, but based on people, there are also some interesting characters out there as well. I've witnessed the young man that has walked the intersection of Kellogg and Rep and presses the button, so.
Have
I
you,
had witnessed, I think Friday night on my way home from the Y, he started at the northeast corner, walked to the northwest corner, to the southwest corner, to the southeast corner, back to the northeast corner. So if you witness that, please let me know.
or if you can video it and send it to me, because we're trying to figure out what to do. He's ruining the traffic pattern. And I've had like 5 people send me emails or texts saying, here's him doing it. We're trying to figure out with PD what to do, because it's not against an ordinance, but he is seriously messing up the traffic pattern at Webb and Webb and Kellogg.
Yeah, I don't know, a lot we can talk to, I don't know if there's anything that can. I don't know if there's any. So,
That's my role.
Has PD made contact with you?
I don't know, I have not, I saw it the other night, I think I've seen him out here before, but I haven't witnessed him do the whole lap. I don't know that there's anything that we can
Like for
write
an
a
hour
ticket
at a
for,
time.
because, you know, he's,
This has to be a mental health issue.
well, I don't know, so if I see him out there again, if I get a chance, I might.
We're Paul and I are still trying to fix it.
We are working, so.
You know where to find it. He wants your attention, then.
Yeah, we got it.
We will pay attention to that, so, and I'll try and talk to the control and peace officers and see if there's anything that we can do, so.
Thank you.
Up to the Public Works quarterly report, the striker improvements, we have started construction on the press box expansion. That construction began in December, and we are estimated to have that completed in March. So that is progressing along. Right near there, the 29th and Greenwich intersection, that signal, we are still trying to get make that better. Last time I was up there, the left turn signals were bagged off because we needed some other equipment to get those running, so we'll see if that's in, and then we'll hopefully improve the timelines of that location, intersection. The pavement preservation program, the 2024 program is beginning. We've got some asphalt overlay projects similar to what we had done last year in District 2. We are also revising when we put up the signs, if you saw the signs, have no fear, new surfaces near, et cetera. We've gotten a lot of calls after we had done the initial phase, which is the base repair, repair to the streets. And then we move into phase 2 at a later date, and that's the asphalt. So we are changing the signs a little bit, and then we will put the signs up after we are completed with the first phase. To alert motorists that we are not done, we will come back with the overlay. So hopefully that helps, and if that works, then we'll create better signs for next year. So, we'll come back in and do the preservative seal that we had done on the mill and overlay streets this year. We have some additional brick crosswalk repair and some crack sealing in residential streets. The Red Bud Path, project from Woodlawn to K96, the city council had approved that, approved the concept. I will be going back to city council for design agreement to go, final plans with finish, this month, February 20th. So they are progressing on design of that. 143rd Street, Harry to Kellogg, city council approved that concept on January 9th. We will continue to move forward with design on that project, as well as continue to coordinate the East Kellogg improvements so that, we coordinate that timing of 143rd with that project. Moving on to, and then, one other project that I went to city council last Tuesday to initiate the 2024 project for design. And one project in District 2 that's off the top of my head is Harry Street from 127th to 143rd. We'll go get a consultant on board to begin design on that project. And I think construction of that is in 2026, if I recall correctly. Moving on to citywide projects, the multimodal facility or the hub, the new transit facility that will be constructed just west of Riverfront Stadium. We had received final plan comments back from MABCD. Our consultant Trans Systems is addressing those comments and obtaining the necessary permits. We hope to have that open to bid probably hopefully late March. Construction will be completed on that, June of 2025 is what we are anticipating. K96 project from I-135 to 21st Street, the expansion of that project from the 4-lane now to a 6-lane freeway with interchange improvements. They have set the second public open house for that meeting, and that meeting will be held April 11th. And that will be at the East Metro Complex at 5 o'clock, I believe. I'll get you that more information. So
Thank you, appreciate it.
I think we're setting up around 4 o'clock, so I think it's open to probably between 5 and 7, if I recall. And then the East Kellogg project, I mentioned that earlier, that is from K96 to a half mile east of 159th Street. That is in design right now, and proposed construction begin in the fall of 2020. And that is what I have for you tonight. Any questions?
I said the K96 thing will be at 29th and Oliver.
Yes, at the East Metro Complex.
Thank you.
The, Trailbrook Trail, that is, Redbud. You said, Oliver and K9, I mean, you said Woodlawn and K96. So where exactly, like, that's just.
Well,
to each other.
So we yeah.
There's 30 miles
It's,
total.
we approved it from downtown to Woodlawn. And then we have a gap between Woodlawn and K96, and that goes further out east to K96 centers.
Oh, okay.
So the trail is there,
Three and a half
this is just enhancing to the
Yeah.
standards of the rest of the trail. Which is so exciting. It's one of my favorite projects, right?
Yeah, it's filling in that gap.
And we put this at the last, when you presented before in the data approved for it to move forward to city council, we're gonna have a pedestrian bridge over Rock Road.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because that's the only way to get people across safely. So, very cool. Any other questions for Paul? Paul, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything at home. Thanks for being here. Okay. Next, new business. Nate, I don't think you've ever been here before.
We
No.
don't do the recommended action.
It's just to receive and file, so we never vote on the reports. Thank you. So the next item is for city ordinance regarding local campaign contributions. This was, it's been to city council twice. First recommendation was that LLCs, which we'll learn a little bit more about, were not able to contribute to city council or mayor campaigns. And then the council, it was brought back to us again, and we decided that we would delay it because we've never really received any feedback on this issue from the community because the way it was presented the first time. And so Nate is gonna let us know a little bit about it. This isn't a voting item. It's just an opportunity for the district advisory board and anyone in the community who wants to provide feedback. So we'll have a presentation from Nate. We'll have questions from the district advisory board members. We'll go out for questions from the public and then come back for questions today. So introduce yourself and the favorite thing about Wichita, Nate.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Nate Johnson, Assistant City Attorney for the City of Wichita. My favorite thing, and I guess this is a bit of a shameless plug, and it'll especially see that after our conversation on the Red Bud Trail, is parks and trails, especially along the river. Especially excited to hear too about the pedestrian bridge over Rock Road.
Me too.
Very awkwardly tried to cross several in various places, so, yeah, especially like that. Also, you stole my thunder from my first slides, which is really all the background now. Background on this for campaign finance. And what we're talking about is city regulation of campaign finance for city elections. And even more specifically about contributions that are made, not expenditures. I'll have some explanation of that as well. But as the council member laid out, what we're considering is an amendment to the campaign finance ordinance. There was an amendment recently made. There was another amendment proposed that would effectively repeal that with a disclosure requirement. And that's kind of the A and B here of what we're considering today. So whether limited liability companies and corporations, and that's all that it's about, not other entities or natural persons, but LLCs and corporations, whether they should be prohibited from making those contributions to candidates in city elections, or B is the alternative, and I should have put this in, allowed to make contributions, but subject to some member and officer disclosure requirements that are a little bit more than what are otherwise required of LLCs or corporations under state law, just for business organizations. On January 16th is when City Council voted to send the issue to the district advisory boards for evaluation and input, and that's part of this process here. So would really appreciate any feedback. Any questions you have during, after the presentation, please let me know as well. So to facilitate the discussion here, your evaluation, I'm gonna look at some key terms, try to define those for you. Describe some of the legal overlay here. We've got federal constitutional rules that maybe play a little bit of a role. State rules especially are a big deal since we're, a city, we're a part of the state and we're subject to state campaign finance rules. A little bit of history on city regulation of campaign finance and the specific issue that's before the council and sent to the district advisory boards too. Key terms here. In the world of campaign finance, it's important to distinguish between contributions and expenditures. We're focusing on contributions here. Contributions are donations that are made directly to or authorized by a candidate's campaign. And of that definition, really what we're focusing on are the donations made directly to a candidate's campaign by an LLC or a corporation. Expenditures include more indirect support, so maybe you're not giving to a person that's part of the election, not giving directly to their actual political committee as separate from a PAC, but the one within their control, their principal committee. So that would be a contribution directly to them. An expenditure would just be any money that you spend to support them that doesn't go directly to that person. So any other money that's about the election that's on that issue, that's in support or opposition of someone else, but does not go directly to the candidate or their controlled campaign committee.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, so a contribution would be if you send money to someone that's running for mayor. directly to them or like their treasurer, the person that's running their campaign committee. If you wanted to maybe group together with some people, maybe a political action committee or maybe some other kind of group, and just give some money in support of someone running for mayor. Not directly to that person, but just maybe taking out some sort of advertisement, maybe putting your own sort of mailer together. Again, a lot of this happens more collectively, giving to groups that aren't directly associated with the campaign. And that's what a lot of its expenditures.
So I will say that during the last election, I had 3 mailers that were sent out on my behalf that I had absolutely no idea were being sent. And I had 5 texts that were sent out in my behalf that I had absolutely no idea they were being sent until I received them and people received them. Some I did send out texts, I did send out mailers, but people did it on my behalf without my knowledge.
I think that, yeah, a perfect example too, where it's not necessarily the form of communication with the public, but where the money comes from, or supporting that communication. And if it's directly through the candidate and money that you're giving to the candidate, that would be a contribution. And expenditures are what are a little more just to the public sphere, or the public forum of debate. And as we'll see when we talk about Citizens United briefly, courts kind of think of that as a bit more important, more at the core of the First Amendment, which is why we talk a bit more about contribution rules in general. Yep.
So are there limits on how much a corporation or an individual can contribute to a campaign?
Yes, there are, and I'll talk about that a little bit with state campaign finance law, which governs us. Just a brief preview: $500 for primary, $500 for general elections for any person. And a person includes natural persons as well as business organizations, not nonprofits. Those are not allowed to make contributions, but otherwise most entities or organizations can make up to that limit. And the issue here is kind of just whether natural persons who also own businesses and can contribute sort of under both of those. And that's kind of the issue, as I'll lay out a little bit more that the rules are getting at, whether they get at that. That's kind of the whole evaluation for everybody. Yeah.
So back one more to the background, who
Oh,
brought
yeah.
this up?
The initial proposal, which is the current code, and I'll lay out a bit, the current code is to prohibit contributions from corporations and LLCs to candidates in city elections. That was proposed primarily by, at the time, Vice Mayor Councilmember Hoheisel. And I guess Councilmember John, I don't want to kind of like speak out of turn for people's positions or anything, but
Councilmember, he was a vice mayor, now he's council member, was the driving force, and then also former Mayor Whipple.
yeah, yes.
To what, before January
Yeah.
2nd? or
Yeah.
after January?
And that's the before January 2nd, and yeah, I've got another slide that has a bit more of that history too, and I'm sorry, it's like, I just sort of front loaded a bit more information, but I do have a bit of that all laid out, as we go through as well. So I'll have that when I have a bit more of the history and some of the state campaign finance rules too. So we've got contributions, expenditures, we're talking about contributions. City elections follow state campaign finance law, which again, I'll touch on in just a second, not federal law. You hear a lot about federal law that doesn't really apply to city elections, except state laws follow the Constitution. So the First Amendment still has kind of this overhanging potential kind of like thing that we need to think about. But when we're talking about contributions, I do want to be clear that maybe, you know, the whole Citizens United, that whole how we can get into campaign finance is not necessarily the issue here. And I say that more from the law department side of kind of no matter what happens, we think the city is not necessarily at legal risk, and we don't think that's necessarily an issue. I also think it helps maybe crystallize what the issue is for consideration here. And Citizens United looked at federal corporate expenditure limits. So the amount of money that corporations could spend on an election generally, not directly to the candidate, but generally. And the court said that's really at the heart of what the First Amendment's trying to protect in terms of political speech. That type of, you know, that money can be the type of speech that contributes to public debate. And when you're speaking to the public rather than giving to a candidate, that's a little bit more of what we think of as free speech, public debate, that sort of thing. So they struck down expenditure limits. They struck those down, but did importantly leave in place, there's this long-standing federal prohibition on corporate contributions. So corporations at a federal level can't make contributions to candidates. So we weren't kind of sure back when Citizens United was passed, whether the court was gonna keep going in that direction. They haven't really. And some courts have sort of said that's why we can maybe look at what's going on with contributions a little bit more. And importantly for us too, it means we can kind of think about whether to prohibit contributions from corporations or LLCs without necessarily running into Citizens United. And then the other part of whether disclosure requirements might be helpful or important or not. Again, we don't have to worry about the constitutional stuff. Happy to answer questions about it, read about it a lot and whatever, but not necessarily the thing that we need to talk about here. So state law does govern this. The State Campaign Finance Act caps contributions that any person can make. That's $500 for the primary, $500 for the general. The definition of person includes corporations and LLCs, as well as natural persons and other entities other than nonprofits.
That's where we are now.
And this is state law. And for a while, city law has followed state law.
Okay.
But where we're at right now is to sort of add on top of this, currently under the city code, a prohibition on corporations and LLCs making contributions in city elections. Obviously, we can't control any other jurisdiction, that sort of thing too, in city elections. But under state law, which is what we followed before the most recent amendment, before that prohibition was added, the city followed state law to just basically allow this, where a person is defined like that, we have consistency with what state law was. And that was a big idea kind of behind the changes when we did that too. So business entities though are not required to disclose anything necessarily beyond what they are, but they are required to disclose information about their business as part of their regular filings with the state, their business registration, and all of that is honestly one of the most accessible state websites that there is, and you can find that information quite a bit. The city can set up some more stringent rules, which is why we're here. Maybe it conflicts a little bit with the state law by setting additional caps, but the way we think about that and whether we conflict with state law, when we're setting restrictions, cities can usually add more restrictions. That's kind of the realm that we're looking at here. And the city actually does have a requirement. I'm not gonna say we super enforce it well, but we do have a requirement that there are campaign finance reports that are supposed to be filed with the city clerk for, that's kind of the reaction I got from other council members as well, but that is in city code.
Let's do it tomorrow.
And,
I just
well-
want to do what's required
Well,
by
and
the
it's-
state.
And I think maybe part of that is because it's the exact same. And it's not,
Can I speak to that since I'm a treasurer on the campaign?
yeah.
We always file at the state level,
Of
and they
course.
always share it with the city clerk.
Oh,
So
Okay,
it's the
perfect.
same
Thank you.
document,
I'll sleep
always.
better tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, we always file.
Tracy's
they
like,
always-
I got this.
Yeah, and thank you, that kind of, because it's the same information. Now, if we switch it up, if we add more like a disclosure requirement for LLCs, then it would, and that's kind of the trigger.
That's concerning me.
Well, and and I'll talk a bit about that and happy to answer questions too, but that really does help sort of complete that picture, because if the information's the same, the sharing. That meets what the city code requires.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this may be further down in the presentation, but is there any other city municipality outside of the city of Wichita that has made such a quick change to something like this? And it looks similar to ours currently?
So answer it a few different ways. So the first is, like, most recently, I wouldn't say that there are municipalities in Kansas that have prohibited LLCs and corporations like this ordinance.
Like there's
does.
not any, or there may be a few, or we don't know?
I think that there are some similar prohibitions kind of in the KCK Wyandotte code. They're not exactly like this. The reason I'm being somewhat hesitant too, though, is before 2015, the city did prohibit contributions from LLCs, corporations, PACs, unions, a whole host of business entities. So there are not other cities with this specific ordinance, but just to be clear, the city does have a history before 2015 of prohibiting corporations and LLCs from making contributions. And that was part of a broader list of entities. And yeah, yeah,
And
please,
I'm
yeah.
staying neutral
Yeah.
on this, obviously, because I just want to hear your input, but I will state or have you state the reason, and it was brought up in 2015 was because of Citizens United.
Oh, exactly, yeah, and, yeah, I keep getting like a slide behind it.
Sorry,
Because of the
okay,
order.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
no, it's like, you know, I'm previewing it well, you know?
Sorry, I don't.
Yeah,
know,
yeah, please, yeah.
But,
We're all
because
like trying to-
it was on, because it was on the
Love
books
the
until
engagement, yeah.
2015, because of Citizens United, even though Citizens United is about expenditures, I'm not. This was
And it was a
something-
little, yeah, so
How long was it on the books before 2015?
I'm not exactly sure when it was, a few decades or so though, it was,
Okay,
yeah,
so there's precedent for it to not.
yes, yeah, exactly.
All right.
In the
Thank you.
city code, yeah, exactly. And at that time in 2015, just to preview, I'll skip through it a bit more later. There were a whole host of other state law election changes that contributed to just sort of looking at the city code, like trying to set, instead of some spring elections and some fall elections, set everything kind of toward the fall. So, and then a few other sort of election law changes that had to happen, and we made to our charter ordinance to match that. And at the same time, there were these cases sort of like saying that Citizens United was only specifically about this or that, about expenditures rather than potentially about contributions in the future, so it was a bit murkier, there was that legal risk to consider. And when we're doing a bunch of stuff to be consistent with state law, then it also makes sense to maybe do something else to be consistent with state law and use the
So let me-
first definition.
So how I understand it is, we did a whole bunch of things to get into sync with state law. And then in a moment's notice in December and January, we flipped it upside down and went back the other direction. Okay, I'm just making sure I understand. Keep going, sorry.
Is that right? Cause I am a little confused on the dates, the timeline here. 2015, I know, but 2015,
Right.
we instituted a no contribution law by.
Before, and yeah, here's kind of a bit more of the history, so. Before 2015 is the first bullet here. So city code previously prohibited contributions by corporations, but other entities as well, to candidates in city elections. The law before 2015 was basically only natural persons
Okay.
give to candidates in city elections.
So which is where January 2nd went back to.
Not entirely, it's only about, and that's exactly, yeah. Not entirely because it's only corporations and LLCs that can't make contributions.
And prior to 2015, it was corporations, LLCs, and what else, PAC?
PACs, unions, and it's a phrase kind of other business entities. Part of the consideration here too was maybe not prohibiting contributions from partnerships or sole proprietorships a little bit, because that's a bit more.
So
kind
it
of
was
an
far
actual
more
person.
restricted prior to January 5th.
That would be
2015.
true, that would be
Far more
true.
restrictive, January 15 became a little more liberal. Or loose.
Yeah, yes,
And
yes,
then January 2nd, we went back to somewhat of the pre-2015 regulation.
components of, yeah.
Okay.
components of the
Exactly
pre-
right.
Yeah,
And how did that happen? That's what I don't understand.
well, yes.
That's another slide.
Well, no, and I can talk about that some here, and it's not, yeah, I'm happy to go into that, it's not exactly the issue, you know. I worked on this for a while. It was seemingly considered maybe at some district advisory boards and not others, and it was only brought before council as an emergency consideration on
January 2nd.
January, it was January 2nd, yeah, there was, yeah, I was trying to think, I was working on another one that's brought up the week before.
When the new council
And the-
members were brought in.
The reason it was categorized an emergency because it had not circulated to all the DAB boards, is that correct?
An emergency under the city code. Well, okay, let me back up. Normally, under the city code, a law is passed with 2 readings. We pass it 1 week, and then there's a second reading the next week. And then that kind of builds in further consideration by district advisory boards, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it has to go, just to make sure I'm clear there. But if you declare an emergency under the city code, then an ordinance can be passed on what we call the first reading. So without having a second. And that's basically what happened here, using the emergency mechanism to pass on a first reading. rather than using the first, second reading process, and it fell over, I counseled, a changing council.
Can I, I'm sorry, what was how did it pass? Can you help me with the vote?
It didn't.
Four, three. And then for the decision for it to be reconsidered, but delayed, like, and to have the feedback that we are now was 5-2.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
And that includes the public comment from the December meeting, which was brought up by multiple community organizations.
Oh, well, the council will consider, yes, all the public comments, yes, for sure, yes, to back up, yeah, all of the discussion about this whole topic is up for consideration by council, including all the district advisory boards.
And it can be March 10th. I think so.
Yes, okay, yeah, I think so, at the first March meeting, so actually, that's correct. So again, this is a bit of that history that we're going through, after 2015, that's when contributions can be made by corporations. On January 2nd, that's when we added to prohibit corporations and LLCs from making contributions. I hesitate to even say it just in case there are some like criminal law more nerds, but we also made some changes to be consistent with misdemeanor penalties under state law to basically boost them, so we have some, we need to make sure we do that so we can enforce our laws. That's not for your consideration necessarily here, we're gonna leave that in place regardless. So this is the current code, prohibiting corporations and LLCs from making contributions in city elections. 2 weeks later was the second consideration to basically repeal that amendment, but also put in place an added disclosure requirement for contributions from LLCs and corporations. So basically, when an LLC or corporation contributes to a candidate in a city election, they would have to disclose a managing partner or responsible officer and provide a little bit of information about who they are. Yeah.
So any individual could have multiple LLCs and they can be the managing partner. And so how does that align to the $500 limit if that managing partner, so let's say I have 15 LLCs and I'm the managing partner. Can I contribute $500 to a candidate under all of those 15 LLCs?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's correct. So the way that state law is set up and the way that we. So let's just assume it's before January 2nd too, sorry, just to sort of say that. So we're operating under state law. Yeah, so if you own 3-4 LLCs, you can make a contribution up to $500 in the primary and general from each of those businesses, as well as from your personal natural person name, entity, individual, identity. That would not change with the disclosure requirement.
Okay, that was my next question.
That would not change with the disclosure requirement. That would change obviously with the prohibition of LLCs and corporations, because those entities would not be able to do that. But the idea would be under the disclosure requirement, if you list the same managing partner for company X, LLC Y, corporation Z, and that information's available, and if we start having a little bit more, an additional campaign finance report with the city, in addition to that being shared from the county, you could see that this person gave to the candidate 6 times, 5 times, whatever it is. Currently, what you see under state campaign finance reports, and please correct me though if I'm wrong, is just the corporation name, the LLC name. So you don't have that additional layer of information. You can look that up on the state, the Secretary of State website, and they just revamped it. I do a lot of licensing permitting stuff, so I'm on that website a lot. I don't mean to like pitch it to everybody here, but that information is available. I think the idea behind this though is to require a little bit more information than what's required on the state side. Particularly with LLCs, because you don't have to list really anybody's name other than your resident agent on the state website or the state annual filings. And that could just be like LLC resident agents of Kansas LLC, basically, as an extreme example. But and just to make clear, kind of for, again, clear consideration of the disclosure requirement, to add a little bit more so that people can,
A human
no,
name.
yeah, exactly. So the person may be responsible for how the entity rates. And there's a few different ways we can use legal terms to get at that. We have an example, I think that was provided, but that's what we would do and tie that to the campaign finance reports that might be filed with the city. So here's the issue again. We've got amended the code to prohibit contributions to candidates in city elections by LLCs and corporations. And we're considering, the council's considering and put to the DABs whether to repeal that amendment. And if contributions are made by LLCs and corporations, that there's a disclosure of a managing or partner or responsible officer. And I know super easy thing to kind of go through with everybody after, I'm sure, a long day. So thank you so much for your questions too. Happy to answer anything else. You can tell me whatever too, but I think shared with the council member for consideration is a bit more of the idea here, but yeah, and happy to answer anything else, but I might just sort of set aside for everybody to kind of talk it through too. So thank you.
Yeah, I think we should repeal it. I have a question.
Sure.
This says, and the names of officers, directors, and quote, anyone with a financial interest in a corporation. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I mean, that's drawn from our liquor license.
It's in anyone. That means I would have to
So
report.
I own stock in Microsoft.
Well, if Microsoft is writing a book, that's a good.
Yeah, that's.
That's a lot of
If
people.
I-
Well, actually,
If I
it's
may.
like one human's name.
It says, no, it
But
says and.
Well, and corporation's a little different, but financial interest means a certain percentage.
Will
And
you define that?
Was that been spelled
It's
out?
usually 5% or more.
yeah. Yes, we do this all, yes, this is what that means under our liquor license. That's where we draw this from, we always ask for.
That's a lot of information, because the disclosure isn't gonna change the contribution.
Not at all.
So I don't know why that matters.
And get more labor on folks like me.
Yeah,
To be honest, it's not gonna stop
no.
the feeding of all these multiple LLCs flooding the campaign. It's just more work for people like me.
But even as the
Right.
way.
Yeah, it's a volunteer.
Yeah,
Well, no.
Tracy, but even as it sits now, I mean. With PACs, I mean, you're not eliminating the flooding of the. See what I'm saying, like, the PACs are still gonna give.
The PAC, well, so if I
And PACs don't
understand,
have to disclose.
Right.
right, so PACs can still. Is
But
that
the money
right?
is still gonna get there either way.
So they can funnel it through the PAC, so they can give directly, and some of them do both. You know, they give the PAC certain amount of money, then they funnel it through the campaign directly, and then they use their LLCs and all the other corporations to funnel all this money to.
And I don't mean to hide from like comments or anything like that, it's just, I don't necessarily decide, or, and I won't be giving like a presentation to council. So like, it just, yeah, I'm happy to answer questions, but maybe direct to the council member, sort of like.
But we just.
But we're just like, yeah, if we got a question, definitely happy to answer too.
But to Stephanie's point, the PACs can still contribute, right?
Yes, they can, yeah.
They're not taking.
Yeah, they can, right?
And
So
there
the
may be
money's
that,
gonna get there either way.
yeah.
So why are we going through all this rigmarole?
Part of the idea is political action committees are subject to different requirements than corporations or LLCs when they make contributions. So PACs themselves do have to disclose some more
Yeah.
information about themselves than corporations. That's kind of. So if it's funneled through PACs, maybe there is, because of the disclosure requirements there, again, the thinking behind it. That there would be some additional layer of campaign finance oversight funneled that way, yeah.
And I would just say too,
Yeah.
if anybody on the district advisory board or the community wants to reach out to me to answer, ask more questions or have a conversation you're not comfortable having in a public setting, happy to chat with anyone about this as I always. So if you,
Can you go back to the slide where you distinguish contributions and something? So this only applies to contributions?
yes. So what it's saying, basically, if I
No,
can.
please, yeah, please, yeah.
So, you know, I had an election last November, and I could accept state legal campaign contributions of up to $500. I'm just gonna use you as an example, from Faith Martin, Faith Martin's husband, whoever. And then if they had an LLC or two LLCs, I could receive $500 from each of them as a campaign, and I had to disclose it on my report. According to now how it's been changed, I could only receive campaign contributions legally in the city, and the state law is different from Faith and Faith's husband, but not for LLC.
But you still could receive from the PAC,
if they,
yeah.
So it's just adding that one layer in there that we're.
well, it's
Disclosure-
eliminating how you can
disclosure.
receive funds, but now it's been suggested that it repealed and it goes back to the way it was, and you have to have a name with the LLC. So it's Martin LLC, Faith Martin, or Donovan.
Well, I guess my 2 cents on this is I attended the meeting for a different reason, that the public showed up. We were doing public comment on the bonuses, but there was a whole bunch of public that showed up in December to give League of Women Voters. I don't know who all was there. The room was full and I thought they were there for us. They were there for someone else.
Poor Faith.
But it was fascinating hearing all of these groups talk, because I think bills and ordinances, there should always be a why are we doing this, what problem are we solving? And so regardless of whether it's like the NDO and this, where maybe they didn't do it right, I think the reaction was to address a concern that the public had brought to city council. And I think reversing that without going through some sort of comment period like this from the community to find out what do you really think. I think that's appropriate, but I mean, the original reason, in my opinion, was on that day, a lot of people were like, whoa, I think we should go back to 2015. I'm not an expert on this, but that's how it felt sitting in the room, not having any skin in the game when they were talking. And so I think it was pushed through really fast inappropriately, and I think it was also potentially reversed really fast inappropriately. So I think the what problem are we solving is where we should come from, and I think making a lot of extra things here is, I think that's not solving the problem that was originally brought up. That's my 2 cents.
Well said. Thank you.
Which original problem?
The problem that the community brought in December saying, we don't want LLCs to be able to contribute anymore because of X, Y, and Z. And they listed out a bunch of things, and you can go back and watch the YouTube video from that meeting if you want to hear what everybody had to say, but just sitting in a room while people were talking, I was convinced, oh, maybe they shouldn't do that anymore. So reading this, it seems like a lot of extra things to do that doesn't really address the original problem that was brought forth during public.
Yeah, I think the disclosure is just gonna create an administrative burden and not really gonna add a lot of value because the information can be found in other ways.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I know you're taking copious notes, Teresa.
Yeah.
I know. The figures are coming. Is there anyone from the community who wanted to provide input on this? Right, seeing none, any other feedback from the
As someone who's a member of the public, a member of giving donations, a member of an LLC, managing member, and a part of the largest PAC in the state of Kansas, I mean, this is not solving anything. I mean, the whole question is someone wanted to stop money from continuing to be given over and over and over again to candidates for whatever reason, which is fine, whatever. It's not gonna solve the issue. They're gonna find a way to go give the money, whether or not they have to sign their name to a piece of paper or not. I mean, there's always gonna be a way to donate that money to whoever they want.
What is the problem that we're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Everybody asked that question, it was like,
So I think the most theoretical way it's been described is whether it's good or bad that people that own multiple LLCs or corporations can give multiple times. And whether that, and you know, and that's, I think, really big picture kind of the issue. And there's been some history, I've only been in Wichita a few years, so I don't necessarily want to speak out of turn, but there have been sort of discussions of the way maybe LLCs have contributed in city elections, maybe to disgraced officials in maybe the past 10 years or so. And that's kind of the more specific way I've heard the issue described. Again, I'm trying to fairly balance all the different ways. Yeah, it's been
You're being
described.
very politically
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, but weren't those things done through expenditures and not for contributions?
I don't necessarily.
You don't
I
have,
think-
you don't have to answer that
Well,
question, I'm sorry.
Well, a lot of, I will say a lot of LLCs have given direct contributions in city elections. And it happened a lot more though, just on the numbers I've seen in kind of the 2019 cycle. than it even did in this past cycle, and was a bit more kind of expenditure heavy, but I might be speaking a bit out of turn. But I think that's kind of how the numbers shook out, honestly, the
Is
last
it-
two elections.
Is there any reference to why there was precedent for year 2015? Why, is there any reference anywhere, for the precedent for that?
Why we switched in 2015.
Citizens.
Yeah, and I think that's
But
it.
that's it?
Well,
They were,
that's a
the
big
community was
part.
scared of being sued
Yeah, and honestly,
for violation of freedom of speech. And Pete Meitzner, who was then chair of the county commission, came and was willing to speak on it, because he wasn't city council at the time. But I spoke to him, and other council members. Councilmember Bluebow was still on the fence, so he recollected that they were advised by legal that there could be a potential lawsuit for the city of Wichita against freedom of speech because of the new Supreme Court ruling, Citizens United.
But now we know that that's more about expenditures and not contributions.
and I'll say that another wrinkle there is, before 2015, it wasn't just corporations and LLCs. And we are on firmer constitutional ground dealing with just those.
Yeah.
It was also PACs and
And
unions
yeah.
and anything other than a natural person. And I would still say that's kind of constitutionally questionable regardless, so I think that was the thinking there. That doesn't mean it necessarily applies in the same way when we just talk about corporations and LLCs, but maybe explains the history.
But I think we want city council following the guidance of legal to protect the city. So whether or not they should or shouldn't have now, back then in 2015, they were told they should probably do this to protect. Now we know that it doesn't matter because it's two different things, apples and oranges.
Well, particularly this ordinance is different.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And it is just clear that contribution prohibitions are okay on corporations under the First Amendment, not necessarily, state law, all the other policy issues.
I think what happened on January 2nd can be construed as someone's constitutional right of freedom of speech because they can't give with their money.
Yeah, and not to say that, there aren't free speech considerations
Right.
with contributions too, and yeah, just that expenditures are more at the heart of the First Amendment, but it's also important to be able to contribute as a free speech issue. And that's why we can't ban contributions from people, for example, as an example.
But you can cap. So I can only
Exactly.
report
Well, the state.
Frank Martin down there for $500 only one time in the general and one time in the primary. With the LLCs, somebody can have 15 LLCs and they don't ever have to show their name because they can have an agent or an attorney to do all this, and they can write a $500 check for all of them. And it's not really satisfying the transparency issue.
But if they want
Yeah,
to give
that's-
their money, why do we keep them from
that's-
giving money?
Because they can, it's volunteer labor. It's what it is.
I would, at the end. But I wanna wait till we get it.
I just have a quick question just on the timing. I think my biggest concern with all of this is how it kind of played out timing wise, where it felt like the process really wasn't followed because the emergency amendment happened, even though it was like gonna be in between legislative or city council bodies, so how do we prevent that from happening, I guess? And is there a way to get the public more involved in some sort of voting process? I don't know, I guess I'm just a little uncomfortable that the city council is the only one who gets to make the
Yeah,
decision.
the irony that the people elected with money are the ones deciding who they get money from, is what
Right.
it seems like. So it's really backwards to me, but I've spent years overseas and I'll just make my comment, this is clearly the people with money and privilege get to donate multiple times, and that's really not a good view of the citizens of the city, and I think that should significantly be considered by the board and whoever else hears this, but just because you can, I can go start an LLC tomorrow and be valued at $900, donate $500 and close it a week later. That is, I don't know a better word, but that's corruption to me, and that's how elections get influenced, and I think it's horrible.
And I think that's a part of the problem that they were trying to solve when people came and brought it up. In my opinion,
Within a week, I can create an LLC, make a donation, and close that LLC. And I don't have to even write my name down, it's clearly around what is supposed to happen. I don't know if that happened or not, but I'm just saying.
And to me, that's the problem we're trying to solve. This is not the answer.
Well, that's just repealing the fact that LLCs can't donate. So this will make it even more likely, because of the emergency thing stopped LLCs from being able to do it.
And this ordinance, if I'm not,
So, okay, yeah, again, we got.
This ordinance is to go back to where LLCs can donate.
oh.
Yeah, so the current code is, yeah, LLCs, corporations cannot contribute in city elections. And we're considering whether to repeal that to allow contributions by LLCs and corporations with
I mean,
disclosure, yeah.
And my concern is just how fast that all happened and who gets to make the decision.
And I did wanna, one note on that at least, yeah.
this portion of it.
Right.
And to have input from the
Oh,
community
yeah.
that we didn't get the first time,
You always bring it back to the data, I appreciate
and the community.
Wichita though does not necessarily have to do second readings, just to protect the city a little bit, like we don't
That means
necessarily
you're
have,
not.
exactly. We have that process in place
Sure.
under the city code for that reason,
But
to
the
allow
fact
that.
that it wasn't gonna be the same people voting,
Right, yeah,
that this is concerning.
It is concerning, but I'd say it's no different than the way you create an LLC, make a donation and disappear.
And it might be concerning, but it's,
Same shell game.
it may be concerning, but it's still allowed, you know,
Within the rules.
it's in the rules that you can do it. And in this particular case, of course, we're crime foul, but there will be other things that happen like this, and so that, whatever you call it, statute, ordinance, or is there for a reason. And he or she just used it for this, but it's still there, we're not really addressing that timeline thing. This is something else that may be a red flag or, you know, but it's still there for a reason. It may be an emergency flood somewhere, and we need to do it, so I'm not really fighting against that. They used it to bring this to wherever they wanted it, because it was there.
Because expenditures can all of a sudden kind of, flip around to become funding coming in from another direction than the Mint LLCs direct to the paying person. It seems like, I mean, one, kind of like, it seems like one way or another, the funding is gonna get put into somebody's kitty to, and so, does that equate back in a circle that says, the person that has felt that's maybe not doing the best, will probably get constantly voted out in that way by a winning person, whether it's, and the funding seems like it's a little more advertising and more stuff that, to give that little leap of help. It just seems like, unfortunately, in our world of politics today, it's about something like that. And they said, this doesn't, I don't like you, it doesn't seem like it takes, goes to the root cause of the.
Right.
Of the issue.
Any other comments? I just want to make a statement, and I made this from, I made many comments, both meetings, but to my core, if someone gives $500 to my campaign, whether it's an individual or an LLC, that does not influence me in any capacity. And it did sadden my heart during both of the meetings that lots of assumptions are made that if you are an elected and you receive contributions, that automatically means that you are corrupt and that you can be influenced unduly. And I have not been, nor will I ever be. And so no matter which way this goes, I will continue to know my true north and to make my decisions based on what I feel is best on Wichita. And I do think it's unfortunate that there's a vein throughout this conversation that's been consistent in both meetings and then somewhat this evening too, that just because you receive legal campaign contributions that you automatically can be individual. And I assure you, me, that is not the case.
With you.
But I wanna say this behind you, Becky. One day there will be somebody sitting in that seat that's not you. And everybody around this table believes in your integrity, that's why we're here. But it's beyond us, and sometimes there'll be other people around this table.
And I understand, and I truly do, and thank you. It is, I hope to be a role model for other electeds and who want to run for office. I wish we could fix the system, but unfortunately, until you can fix human nature, there's no system that can fix this. Right? We can have all the rules and all the laws and all the things, but this is about human nature and doing it. I really appreciate everyone's feedback. I really do.
I guess I would say that this isn't about the integrity of the elected people, it's about the people trying to get their money and influence.
It's probably fun.
Yeah.
All right, great discussion. Thank you, Nate.
Oh, sure. Thank
Great
you,
job.
everybody.
Great job.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Next, we have the unified zoning code, large scale utility solar system. Probably not quite as controversial, but equally as important and exciting.
It's pretty illuminating.
Oh,
Pretty funny.
blind us with your brilliance, Scott. So Scott, would you like to introduce yourself and your favorite thing about?
Sure. So I'm Scott Wadle. I'm the director of the planning department. It's good to see you all. And my favorite thing about Wichita, a lot of people said things that I was thinking of, so I'm just gonna go with opportunity. I really think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So, solar, I think we're doing solar first. So, so we've got relatively long PowerPoints because we get very excited in the planning department about PowerPoint slides. But I'm trying to be very brief on this one. I'll try and do it in less than 10 minutes. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. If I'm going too slow, let me know. But we'll squeeze through it at a nice pace and ask me questions as we go along. So this one's about solar and zoning code update. This is primarily, we see this primarily as a county topic, and the reason why is because we're talking about large scale solar farms is what some people call them. So the utility scale, commercial scale, industrial scale, whichever adjective you like to use with that. We really don't see, though there's a high likelihood that we would see something quite of that size in Wichita. It's entirely possible. But in the county, they're having active conversations about it because there's at least one, possibly three companies that have been interested in coming into Sedgwick County and doing these types of developments. And so what the county did is they passed a moratorium. It goes until March 20th. It gave us 6 months, which seems like a lot of time, but it really isn't when you go through a public consultation process. To revisit the regulations and see if any changes are necessary. And so what I'm going to do is give you highlights about where the Planning Commission is on this right now. It's a subset of the Planning Commission, and I'm here to collect your feedback and input on it. So with that, we'll go through it. So that's what it's about. There's a moratorium. Now, number one, this is not about a specific solar project. This is about the rules and regulations overall. This would apply to both the county and the city because we have a unified zoning code. And so that's why we're going to both entities. And this topic does not include accessory uses. So solar panels that you would put on your house, solar panels at the Mays High School, solar panels at a new business that's coming in, those are all accessory to the principal use, which in that case was a school or a business or a home. So we're not talking about accessory ones, we're talking about solar panels that are put up to generate electricity that's set and put on the grid. So we'll go through these things, existing conditions, all the way through the most recent update, which is the Sedgwick County Association of Cities. So existing conditions in 2019, the Unified Zoning Code and the Comprehensive Plan, he was talking about both of those documents quite a bit, were updated to address renewable energy systems. So, and solar energy conversion systems was one of those. It requires a conditional use. So if you want to do this on your property and do a solar farm, then you have to come in for a conditional use, which requires the Planning Commission and City Council or County Commission. There's 20 different requirements that go along with that already, so it's quite a substantial list. And there's the ability to add conditions as needed as a case comes in. So if you want to limit its size, or you want to make sure there's a certain size fence or whatever you would like to do, you can add those as conditions. And then there's, again, the formal review process, which you're familiar with from a lot of the zoning cases. There's also guidance. So what we talked about was in the zoning code. Those are our regulations. There's guidance, which is in the comprehensive plan. And the guidance in the comprehensive plan talks about selecting appropriate locations and the challenge of that. Design and performance standards would need to be established, which in most ways was done with the zoning code. But then there's a third one that I think is really important here, which is to protect the viability of existing cities and their ability to grow. That was really spelled out quite loudly, I would say, in the comprehensive plan. So in terms of the current status, well, we're going through this moratorium process and we're right about here where we're collecting input. This Thursday, Advanced Plans Committee hopefully will consider it and then recommend text changes to the full MAPC. From the full MAPC, it would go on to the City Council and the County Commission. So there we are. So here's our schedule of events. It goes on before this, but you can get a sense of where we are. So we're right in around here. So in terms of information, there's a lot of staff reports. These are available on the webpage. There's a whole bunch of information out. So it talks about public input that's been collected through a town hall. We had about 100 people, I would say, out at Pacific County Extension office, which was really great. We had an online solar survey. I don't remember how many responses we got on that one, but we captured those. We did the solar best practices report where we looked at what other communities are doing across the country and what's working well. And then also we package all the emails and letters and whatnot that we receive into a public information packet. And then we're constantly adding to that and we bring that to our different meetings with the planning commission and ultimately the governing bodies. So best practices, I just want you to know that there's a number of different documents out there. So we've pulled information from all of these. Public input, we talked a little bit about all of these things. These are what we are incorporating and carrying with us through the process. We've had over 100 emails and letters, and that was from October to today. I think we're probably closer to 120 so far. So that report keeps getting a little bit bigger and bigger. So from the town hall and from the survey, because solar can cover a whole bunch of different things, we really were curious, where should we focus? And so that's where we use the public input. And it really identified these things. So urban development and growth, decommissioning, and groundwater contamination seem to be some really themes that emerged from quite a few of the topics. In addition, there was a fourth one that was added on. It's really a subset of urban development in my mind, which is setbacks and size and configuration. The Advanced Plans Committee, it's a subset of the Planning Commission. It's 7 members instead of 14. Said these are the 4 things to focus on. So with those themes identified, we did a review. So we looked at what was existing in our documents, what public input there was, best practices, and what other communities are doing. And then that helped us to identify different potential options. So that's the process that we used. We did that in consideration that there's 2 documents that could be changed, both the zoning code, which is the regulations, and the comprehensive plan, which is guidance. So in terms of the themes, we'll go through each one, decommissioning. So the Advanced Plans Committee, now, because we give you kind of a shortened one, we don't provide you with what the regulations are now, but know that a decommissioning plan needs to be developed as required today. This is what Advanced Plans has discussed adding to that, so that the removal of the equipment should be to 3 to 4 feet in depth. That's far enough so that plows and stuff aren't hitting it if they decide to take it back into farming. That there should be stronger financial guarantees between the company or the applicant and the county or the city to ensure that there's money if the company goes broke or goes bust, that you can still get the equipment out of there. That the plan should indicate the length of time necessary for the decommissioning, and there should be notification. And then that was for the zoning code, so those would be requirements. And then for the comprehensive plan, they said, nah, we think the guidance is good. So no recommendations for changes there. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there. Everyone cool with how we're going? Pace going okay?
Yep.
Comments, questions about this one? Yep.
Just real quick, the decommissioning about the 3 to 4 feet depth. I'd recommend maybe getting your electrical board to look at how to make that amend or comply with NFPA 70, because there's rules in the electrical code that all decommissioned systems, essentially you have to take it all in, no matter where it's at.
Okay. Great. No, that's good. We'll get with MAPCD on that one. Thank you. This is where many heads are better than just one.
I'll just dig it 5 foot down.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, well, let's wait until.
They will.
Yeah.
I promise.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Nope, okay. Very good, so we'll move on to the next one, which is groundwater and contamination. We've heard this one quite a bit at public comments, and I think a lot of the fear was that if you're in the rural area and you're on a well, what then could leach into the soils and contaminate the groundwater, which then you would be drinking. So the zoning code currently doesn't say too much about it, other than that a NEPA style review should be done. So the Advanced Plans Committee is recommending these updates, so requiring pre-construction testing and testing during the project and after the project is done, testing of soil and groundwater to determine if anything is there. And this would protect both the company and the property owners who are doing the project and also the community, because sometimes arsenic and other materials occur naturally in the environment. Also, it could be from a prior project or use. So testing it before would do that, but then also we didn't want to just test after the project was done, because what if something is happening during the project? So testing during certain intervals. And then that there should be a list of construction materials that are submitted to the relevant staff people for comment prior to the application going to the governing body. So for instance, if there's a type of pipe or material that should not be used, it gives staff an opportunity to say, hey, let's prohibit and restrict this, or at least recommend it. In terms of the comprehensive plan, there were no changes recommended to the guidance in there. Okay, so that's what I've got on groundwater contamination. Any comments, questions on that? No? Okay. Urban development and growth. This has been a very hot topic on this one. So in the comprehensive plan, there's a map that shows the urban growth areas. This is for 2035. These are the anticipated areas, not necessarily going to absolutely positively be the areas, but this is a best estimate on where communities are likely to grow, and it's a combination of what they've requested and a review process to ensure that they can actually service it. It's fairly reasonable. So you can see some of them are bigger than others, and that's just the nature of growth and the anticipated service areas. So, okay, that's exactly what that says. So I'm just gonna, in different words. So here's the urban area of influence, and they match for the most part what was in the urban growth areas. And you'll see, except for Viola, East Row doesn't have one, and the city of Wichita is not there. And you say, well, why is that? Well, because this is in the zoning code, and if you have a case that happens in this area, it's not in Goddard, but it's in the area just outside, and it's in the unincorporated county. If it's in an urban area of influence, there's a special process that takes place in all of these red boxes. So the planning commission for that smaller city receives notification that the case has been filed for. Their planning commission has an opportunity to review it, to hear it, and provide a recommendation. Then it goes to the planning commission. And ultimately, if they recommend denial, if the smaller city's planning commission recommends denial, then it requires a supermajority of the county commission to approve that application. And that's so in this way, this is where the county commission has said, we will restrain ourselves in a way of giving the smaller city a bigger say in the process. They're not delegating their control. They're just saying, we're going to place that on us. So. So then, and this is interesting. This has changed over time. It was around, then it was gone, and now it's back again. So there's been some shifts in thought at the county commission level. So in any case, and also cities can always provide comments in other ways, through sending letters, county commission, city council resolutions, etc. So there's always that out, but this is a formal process. So part of the discussion and debate has been, well, should the zoning code just prohibit having these utility scale, commercial scale solar facilities developed in an urban growth area? And so this was a map that was developed that showed 3 to 5, 3 mile setbacks from each of those. And you can see it leaves this portion of the county where you could still do solar projects, maybe this corner up here. This is one that we did in-house. There's a question about a 1 mile. So we did 1 mile, and you can see the areas that are open around here. The advanced plan so far has recommended no changes to the process, no prohibition in these areas. And again, this has been a topic of quite a bit of discussion. The city of Mays has actually come out and said, we want to have this prohibited in the urban growth areas. So it's been an interesting dialogue. And what they did, advanced plans, part of their reasoning is because they're comfortable with the existing process. That way they figured if the city wants it, they can comment during the process. If they don't want it, and they can also comment during the process. Also, they relied a lot, they said there's a lot of benefits to the conditional use process, so we think that that's good, it's flexible. And lots of other opportunities for cities to express what they would like to have happen. As far as the comprehensive plan, advanced plans is recommending no change to that one. So that's what I've got on urban growth areas. Any thoughts, comments on that? No, okay, stunned everyone or?
Yes.
So it is 1 mile, or it is 3 miles, not 1 mile.
Well, it depends. According to state law, you've got the option if you don't, it's a different system than us. I think it's if something to do with the zoning code. I'm sorry, it just doesn't apply to us. But
So
other
we're
communities
sticking
do
with
have
the
that.
3.
Ours is actually a custom one
Oh,
that has been developed over time, and this is what it is,
Okay.
right here. Now, and the urban areas of influence is actually this map. You'll notice Wichita doesn't have one, and the reason why is because the planning commission is a joint city and county planning commission. So Wichita already has representation on the planning commission.
You made a special one that worked best for Alabama, but it's less.
Yeah, essentially, this has been our history that has evolved to get us to this point.
Will this apply to both utilities and commercial, like companies wanting to do this?
It depends, if it's the primary or principal use on the property, then yes. If it is accessory, so if it's like a solar or panel or array with a house or school or a company, then it does not.
But you said earlier, this is for solar arrays that feed back into the grid.
Yes, and so long as they're the principal use. Not accessory.
Feeding the grid is the principal.
No. So there's solar panels at the zoo, right? The zoo is a principal use, so solar panels are an accessory use, so this would not apply to them.
Oh, a solar farm, you mean you can't have just a solar farm or it's
Yeah.
different, okay.
Yeah, exactly. If Integra's talking about going into Bel Air, that would be in Bel Air zoning, but let's pretend they were going in unincorporated county. They've talked about having a solar array or farm that's a certain size. As long as it's associated with their campus, then it is an accessory to the actual factory or company. So it would not be covered under this. It's solely if your sole intent is just to set up a whole bunch of panels and just generate lots of electricity and feed it into the grid, start collecting money for that, then this would apply.
If you're trying to sell the solar power you generate, is that correct?
Yes.
That's
Does
my-
Evergy currently allow you to do that?
Well, we've got a company that's getting ready to apply to do it. I mean, they're chomping at the bit. We're waiting for the moratorium to expire.
So it's not towards utilities, it's commercial app, like
It could be both.
company.
We don't distinguish. I mean, it's just, as long as this is what you wanna use the property for.
These are the guidelines.
Yeah, the comprehensive plan is guidelines, the zoning code's requirements. Yep. Good conversation, because this is the number one question that comes up is, can I put solar panels on my house, and is this gonna disrupt that? Okay. Size and configuration setbacks. So a setback is how far away from the property boundary you can be. Advanced plans have said no changes recommended. Currently, the setbacks are 40 feet is what's required. And they said, look, you can adjust it during the conditional use process when you're considering the item. Also with the comprehensive plan, they said no changes needed as far as setbacks. Setbacks have come up, and I'll tell you why it's come up is because there's some questions about, well, how close should solar panels in a solar farm be able to get to a residence, for instance, or a neighboring property? So and that's been some of the discussion that's happened in public input sessions is, hey, if I'm not participating and I've got to live next to this, do I have to see it? All that kind of stuff.
So then how would a solar farm be zoned? Would it be like commercial?
Well, right now, it's, the underlying zoning can be a whole variety of different things. But we require a conditional use, so it's gotta go through this review process and could have additional conditions. So it might be commercial, could be rural residential, could be, residential, but not very likely, but entirely possible.
But the only restriction is it has to be 3 miles What was the 3 miles, please?
I think it came up as some other counties have a, area of influence for smaller cities, it's 3 miles, ours is not set up that way.
So it could theoretically, a solar farm could be right next to a residential property.
Yep, absolutely could,
Oh, wow.
yep. And the setback would mean that it's 40 feet away from, the boundaries of the property. So, they would have to set it back that far from the property boundary.
So even if the site is already zoned commercial,
Mhm.
they would still have to get conditional use?
Yep. For this particular use, yep, solar farms. Okay, so a question has come up about size limits, that was another thing that advanced plans considered. And the consensus from them was no, limit. The reason why this one has come up is because in some of the discussions, it sounds like one of the companies interested in coming in Sedgwick County is talking about doing a 1,600 acre size solar farm. So that would be at least, 2-3 miles with solar array, so at this point, no limit. The contributing factor is because they felt like a conditional use process can address that and you can establish size and location limits. Also, the comprehensive plan, they said no changes are recommended. So any thoughts, questions on that? No? Okay, just gonna keep rolling. Okay, one of the best practice documents says that typically no need for taller than 20 feet above the ground for solar panels to be mounted. Currently, the requirement is no taller than, I believe it's 35 feet. The Planning Commission Advanced Plans Group, they're recommending that it be changed to be 25 feet would be the height limit, with the ability for it to be increased during the conditional use process if the applicant comes forward and provides a reason for it. And one instance or reason that possibly could come up is we've seen solar panels with farms underneath, and they still actively farm. It depends what you're growing, but it is possible, so you might have to have an extra height. And so they said, reasons for why they're making this recommendation, some of the factors are those that are listed. No changes recommended for the comprehensive plan. Okay, and then we're on to other topics. Anyone want to talk about height questions? No? Okay, Roland. So additional topics are differentiation between small and large, because again, there are 20 different requirements that they have to meet as part of their application process. So the Advanced Plans Committee said, yeah, we probably should split up small and large so that smaller ones don't have to go through the same amount of complications and requirements. But let's not do it right now because it's really complicated already. So maybe that'll be a future work item for us. We'll see. Fire protection is another one, and Advanced Plans is recommending including language. Sorry, I didn't get it in here. That the fire departments should review it, provide comments to the governing bodies as part of the application process. So, looking at the batteries, all that kind of stuff, how it ties into the grid, and all that. Yeah.
Would that include the lay, like the lay of the land, the lay of the farm that they?
Like
the
a
fire can get around it, I guess it's not about the setback.
So they would have access, that's right, it would cover everything, so they'd have a chance to provide comment on the home.
Is that a common problem?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's, because of the battery storage and because of ultimately the amount of electricity that's being generated, that's why fire's been really interested in it, and the new fire codes that are coming out now start to address solar farms, so they make sure they can do that.
So electric is a whole different beast when firefighting. So when we had the electric bus catch fire, it took 30,000 gallons of water to put that out. And it wasn't even that much of a fire, it was because of heat from the battery. So I've been trying to connect fire with some other individuals that I know who are working in technology, because it's gonna change how we fight fires. And also charging stations for electric vehicles, which I know is different,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
mean, it's a whole different world of firefighting with technology that's advancing, including solar.
Water and electricity don't make
No, they
things on fire.
They don't like to.
Typically foam. But also I had a question, fencing and all of that, is that being considered to keep
It
kids
is.
and whoever else out?
It is,
From a safety perspective?
And so, and.
Or is that gonna
everybody-
follow NFPA
Well,
electrical?
I don't know about following that, but there is a requirement that fencing would be installed. Now, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the taller the fencing, the more secure the fencing, the more like does it start to look like a prison, can be the critique that you receive, so how much is too much, how much is not enough? The other thing that's come up too is screening, so if I'm a neighbor, I'm not participating, how much of the fencing do I have to see, how much of the project do I have to see? So fencing and screening and landscaping really. We've taken, because this topic affects the entire county, we've taken it to Sedgwick County Association of Cities. Great, not a lot of discussion, but it gave us a good opportunity to at least introduce the topic to a lot of folks. So we've heard from a council member out in, which one was it? Garden Plain. We've heard from Mays, we've heard from Colwich. And the others we haven't heard from yet, but I understand there's hopefully some more that are gonna provide some input, so.
Now, why is this come up? Just because we got a solar outfit that's really pushing,
Yeah,
starting this now?
I would say yes, I think that has prompted the review. It's all about, we've had stuff on the books since 2019, it's not very long, but technology has really come along, there's been some infrastructure funding, also incentives now that are offered. And I think that's caused 2 or 3 companies to look at Sedgwick County very seriously. And I think that's caused folks to say, whoa, time out, let's make sure our regulations are the right fit for our community. And then then we'll have an
Well,
opportunity.
I know a lot of our surrounding communities are worried about the wind farms. We don't have that problem here, or,
Only because we prohibited them.
oh, they're prohibited.
They're prohibited, and that's because of the interference that it could cause with the aircraft industry here, so, yeah. So in that case, it was planning and zoning.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, if
That
this
was-
is all solar, which, I didn't realize Sedgwick County.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we received some comments from there in terms of size and scope, areas of influence, limiting the overall size setbacks and separation of projects. So, just an illustration of some of the input that we received. And again, we've talked about the next steps, so I'm just here to collect feedback. I think it's been a wonderful conversation, and I don't know if there's anything else that folks would like to say, or if there's members of the public who'd like to provide comment. I'm all ears.
I don't know where on your timeline and all the different areas that this may apply, but have we looked into any kind of health hazards of having that much solar all congested in one area to the community?
So we've been working with Susan Erlman, who's the expert for the county when it comes to environmental health. And we were, because I could tell you to a certain amount, but she's the expert. And so she's not indicated any concerns other than that she wants to be able to ensure that we can protect the soil and the groundwater, because that has been highlighted by the public. And because she wants to make sure, for instance, if you're putting in galvanized pipes, like that, it's how much zinc is in the material, is there anything that could leach? The panels themselves, it doesn't appear to be anything, there's a lot of concern about it, but the science that we've seen doesn't suggest that there's any issues with that. It's just, but she wants to see that materials list in order to be able to guarantee that they would move.
It just looks scary, right?
Well, and it's new and it's different, and there's a lot, there could be a lot of it, 1,600 acres is quite a bit, so we wanna make sure we get it right.
Well, you don't know the questions.
Right.
I don't know how you write it in there, but I would just, I'm in the electrical industry, I would just say that you make sure Nordic and his team at MABCD obviously review all of this, and this is held to the same building standards that any other electrical job is, because there's certain pipes that go in the ground, certain type of wire, insulation, all that's, there's electrical under this building right now on the ground, so there's ways to do it that's safe, but if you don't have your MABC overseeing all of that, then and
Yeah.
reviewing the plans, then that's where it goes sideways real quick.
A good point, and anything requiring a building permit certainly would, it's just how much of it. It's all we know.
Yeah, because if this is going to utility also, then there's a whole nother set of rules of fencing and locks and keeping people out of it, so
Yeah.
all of that needs part of it.
I appreciate how thorough this is, because I'm excited about renewals, and I'm glad that, I know you're reacting because people wanna do it now, but I'm excited how thorough this is. It looks like you guys have taken in a ton of public comment and local, I think this is great.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public? All right, thank you, Scott. Thank you.
You betcha. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm fucking excited, so.
All right, so Scott, the Wichita area metropolitan, the Wichita area planning department zoning letter notification process.
All right, so this one, very similar to the last one in terms of just here to collect feedback and input. So any thoughts and ideas that you have? You all deal with zoning cases, this comes up quite a bit, so this will be very familiar to you. But I'll try and take the time to make sure that everyone's on the same basis. So again, feedback, questions, we're gonna cover these 4 things. So we're here to ask your opinion about the distance that the letters go out to, who should receive them, what languages they should be in. Well, language isn't really so much a question as much as an update for you about what we found out. And then letter content and just talking about that in general. And we'll go through all these different topics in order to address that. So in terms of the review, so this came up back in 2022. This is much like almost all the material that you've seen so far. It's a continuation of a dialogue about what's the right fit for our community. And this conversation got started quite a bit ago. There's been comments from members of the public, both this DAB and other DABs, about concerns about notification distances, all of these topics, and so that gave us an opportunity to look into it. So, and the district advisory board feedback has been, why not a sign here? Why not a letter there? That kind of thing. So that's really kind of the genesis of this. Quite a bit of discussion leading into 2023. So now we're fortunate because it's an opportunity for us to pick that conversation back up and continue it. This is our calendar. It adjusted just a little bit because some of the DABs weren't able to hear it. We'll have some in March, but overall it's pretty good. So the current practice, this is a zoning process. We get an application, it'll go to the DAB, it'll go to the planning commission, then it'll go to city council, and then it's either approved and the ordinance is published, it's denied, or it's sent back to MAPC. These are really very basic flowchart. We can get more complicated than that, but so there's public notice done in the newspaper, emails, yard signs, letters, and then on our webpage, we also produce information provided that way. We'll go into more depth in all of these, but this is just a quick overview. So our legal publication notice generally does not attract a lot of people. You would be shocked. Just reading the sports section, I came across this, but it's required, and it's by state statute, and it's required to go in 20 days prior to the planning commission hearing. And if it doesn't go, then the case doesn't go. Like, you have to go right back to start and start all over again. And emails, so we send out information about the agendas and constant contact. We also do case-specific emails, so if you sign up and you indicate an interest in the case, we'll add you to a list and send you a notification. We also.
So can I start with information? So that means they see the case signed somewhere, they go in and ask to be updated and into their email, or?
Yeah, we'll do that. Also, if you come to the planning commission, you fill out the little sign-in sheet, you indicate which case, put your email down, we'll add you to a list. And that, you may not get a lot of emails because the case might just proceed through, but if the case gets sent back to the MAPC or if it gets deferred or whatnot, you'll get a heads up on that. But we will also send an email, courtesy email to the HOA or the neighborhood association.
If we have to be correct.
Yes.
Which is the challenge, because HOAs and neighborhood associations don't always keep their information updated with the city, and then there's no way for the city to know, oh, John was the HOA president and now it's Stephanie. So, but then neighborhood associations and homeowner associations get mad at us because they don't get notified. But
2 months ago, I was told by your team that that's not required.
It's not.
It's a nicety that happens
Courtesy.
sometimes.
You betcha.
You just said you do it.
Yeah, we do it as a courtesy.
But it's not state law.
Sometimes.
If you're registered, we should be sending it to you. If the case is happening in your neighborhood association.
What we're saying is if we have the correct contact.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Becky, how do we
It's-
update that information to the city? What's the best practice?
Teresa, like you reach out to your community service representative or your council member or whatever. Because we have a database by each district, but, you know, so we send things out even, you know, as a district. Hey, there's this going on or that going on, and we get bounces back.
Sure.
But then you don't even have a clue who to go to.
Good discussion. Rolling along. Okay, so here's the,
And that email would just kind of go out to like people within a, let's call it,
Nope.
500,000 feet or, no, that's.
nope, you're thinking of the letter.
Yeah.
And we're getting there, but the email is just a heads up, courtesy thing. It's not even mentioning any regulations or policies.
But that is citizen initiated though, that means the citizen has to recognize the sign or know something's going on, then go in, ask for information regarding this case.
They could do it that way, that's true, that is true. Yeah. You know, we don't have a whole lot of that happens, but that's entirely possible, yeah. So we do a sign, and again, the sign, this one, well, we'll get to it, it's in here. It's a MAPC policy, and it's for the city only, it's not required for county cases at all. And the MAPC policy, its enforcement is with the MAPC. So we'll have people show up to planning commission and say, hey, they didn't put out the sign or blew down, got wet, whatever. It's up to the MAPC about what they want to do about it.
And this is not a state law.
Nope.
Again, this is an additional thing that the city does to encourage community engagement.
Yep.
And who's responsible for putting the sign out, Scott?
The applicant is responsible for doing it, and they have to pay $5 to get that sign.
Now, I think that's a problem, because we had an issue in our neighborhood, the applicant, he put it inside his house. I'm sorry, I don't think an applicant should do it, I think it's for the neighborhood, not the applicant. I think that's a problem.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Okay, and the duration, it says at least 13 days prior to the public hearing. All right, notification letter. So this is required by state statute. So if you don't do this, the case cannot be approved. You gotta go back to the start, you gotta do this. So for a city case, the minimum that the state sets out for cities is 200 feet. You are required to send it out at least 200 feet. For the county, you have to send it out at least 1,000 feet from the property, and it's from the radius. The city of Wichita has a policy where they say it varies from 200 to 1,000 feet, and it depends on the number of acres. And I'll show you the table, here it is. So, if it's up to 1 acre, it's 200 feet, and then you can see it goes all the way down to over 25 acres, it's 1,000 feet. In terms of recipients, the statute is that it only goes to property owners. Does not go to the people who live there. Registered HOAs and registered neighborhood associations will send them a courtesy letter. We've got their information, so. In terms of addresses, so the applicant is required to purchase a list from a title company. We require that as part of the application process. It's not by state statute, it's not by a formal thing other than the application. And again, it's on the application form. And part of that is because if we were to pull the addresses and then one was missing, whose fault, you know, who's to blame? And that's part of the reason why we get a title company, because it's an independent verification that it's done correctly. Now, an important note, the notice area and the protest area can be different, they're different things and they can be different distances. So protest area is set up by state statute. It's 200 feet and it does not get any bigger than 200 feet. It is 200 feet and it stays 200 feet. And depending on the number of protests that come in, if it goes over 20% of the land area in there, then it can trigger a supermajority requirement of the city council in order to approve the zone change request. Does that make sense? There's a lot to it. We'll go through it in an example. Notification, however, for the city of Wichita is 200 to 1,000 feet. Can't be less than 200 by state statute. But again, the city provides beyond 200 feet as a courtesy. And that is by a policy that was adopted, but it does not change the vote requirements. So folks outside of that 200 feet, they can protest all day, and we've seen some. I've seen them where it's an entire neighborhood that has submitted protest petitions, but it doesn't count to the 20% and it doesn't count towards changing the vote requirement. Unless it's in the 200-foot protest area. Doesn't mean it's not important, I'm just telling you that per the state statute, it doesn't trigger a different mechanism. Here's an example where they were different. So this is the notification, this is the protest area, this is the notification area. See, they were different because by city policy, the size depends on the number of acres.
So like in that example, there was no
No
protest area, there was no resident who could have protested that.
Well, the property owners would have been this one, and sliver there and that one. Now, when it gets calculated, the percentage does not include right of way. Or property that, yes, it doesn't include right of way. So there's a lot that's subtracted from that. So even though it looks like a small bit, it can be a pretty sizable percentage.
So that means you're tracking all of your protests,
Yep.
whether it's levels, so that
Yep.
you can make sure.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
And
And not just in an aggregate.
no, you, so we get those. Yeah, there's a form we suggest that you use, and you just have to meet the requirements in state statute, but it has to be signed off on by all the property owners, have to sign it. Yep. Okay. So that's what we do now. One of the questions coming actually is about distance and notifications. So we looked at other cities and what they do here in Kansas, and you can see that all of them are at 200 feet, at least on this list, except for Lawrence, which is at 400. Okay. And then we looked at cities, communities, and other states. And so you can see it's ranges 300, 200, 250, 1,000 feet in some instances, 370. Here's a little bit more background to it. Some of the ones in Oklahoma are really interesting because they've got like a minimum of 10 separate owners required. The one in Des Moines takes quite a bit. It depends on what type of zoning they're doing. So. Ready to flip slide? Okay. So again, this is the distances at City of Wichita. So 200 feet, 1 acre, over 25 acres in 1,000 feet. So some of the stuff we just were kicking around. Okay, well, one option would be that you could go 500. You could do it 2.5 times an increase. You could stay at 500 and then go 750, 1,000. There's a whole myriad of ways that you can do it. You can leave it the same and use the current system. Just options. But really what we're looking at is, what's your feedback? No changes, decrease it. So keep it the same, decrease it or increase it. Really, it boils down to 3 options, just a matter of what variety you go with. But there's more to it. So we've been talking about distance. We'll talk about the costs, because the cost, there are some costs that you might be surprised to find out what it is. So we'll go through that. So 200 feet, for instance, is the orange in this one. Green represents 500 feet out, and then purple is 1,000 feet. So this is what it would look like in kind of a fairly typical neighborhood in kind of the inner kind of core area. I think it's Riverside. This is another example, same distances, same colors. So just to give you a sense of how many properties you go further out, right? And we've got the numbers, and I'll show you in just a second. A little bit larger lots in this example. So in terms of the cost, so if an applicant comes in, we know they're going to pay $175 at least to get the property addresses from the title company. Then it's an additional $18 a month. So if they have 20 properties, they're paying $175 plus another $180. So, and then for the planning department, we calculate our cost at $2.64 because we just take a label, we print out labels, we stick them on an envelope, we stuff the information in, and we send it off. So here's what it looks like. So for 200 feet, the Riverside example, the Meridian example, and Woodlawn example that you saw, there were 33 properties, 28 properties, 17 properties. This is what the cost would be to the applicant. It's the first number there. The next one is a cost to MAPD. You can see if we go up to 1,000 feet, it goes from 33 to 390, 28 to 344, 17 to 201. And the costs go from about $600 to $7,000, $500 to $6,000, $300 to $3,500, just about. So that's what happens as we increase distances. So the question for you all is, what do you think about those distances?
Number one, the applicant shouldn't be able to put up the signs.
Okay, okay.
Because, you know, that's, and unfortunately, it comes back to you guys, because they say transparency is not there. Well, the sign in behind a tree, or, I mean, it is amazing where those signs show up, if they show up. And a lot of times, that sign's the first thing, that's the only thing people see.
It is the first thing.
And if the applicant can hide that, that's not right, that needs to be where all the neighborhood can see it.
But the signs aren't required, right?
They are required by MAPC policy for City of Wichita applications.
But the state requires them.
State does not require the signs, and the state does require the names.
But city trumps state at the city level, right?
At this level, you can be more, restrictive in terms of placing additional,
Yeah,
yes, you can. You just can't be less restrictive.
that's right.
Now, just talking about some of our meetings, I mean, I hate to say it, you guys are the ones that say, boy, they're not being very transparent. The finger kind of point's gonna be back to the city of Wichita, that they're sneaking this through. And I think that's a terrible problem, I really do.
So can you just,
What do you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Thinking what through?
Well, it makes people look like it's not, they're trying to sneak some of this zoning change through. And a lot of these zoning changes really affect neighborhood values. And that's very important, that neighborhood needs to know about it.
So I think what Sam's trying to say is that when you guys present a zoning change
Oh,
to
in
us,
here, yeah.
it's already vetted, approved, like it wouldn't be here if you guys hadn't already perused it, right?
No, that's true. Sometimes the staff recommendation is to deny the application.
Yeah,
It
that's true.
still
Yeah.
has to come back.
So the only reason it's here is because they reviewed and
Well,
not
what-
they approved it.
But what I'm saying, is from the person that sees the sign,
Yeah.
and then they don't know about it.
Yeah.
And the vote's in 2 days and they didn't know, and
yeah,
they, you know, and they come in here and tell us all of this. The perception is
The
that
perception.
City's in on this, and it's going slid under the table.
That's right.
and I get that. I guess-
Because oh, go ahead.
I guess my question is, what would you propose that we do differently? So far, I've got the sign. Don't allow the applicant to put up
I
the
would say
sign.
increase to 500 feet based
Well,
on the feedback that we
actually,
had here for
even that
notification,
is-
and renters are also notified, not just property owners.
Even that distance kind of varies with some of the projects, I think. If it's gonna have a real negative potential negative
Well, I won't say negative, but impact.
impact, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that area needs to be a little larger. I don't know how to.
Okay,
Yeah, so
you don't have to come up with an answer tonight. This is just to get your initial feedback. But if you've got more specifics on what changes you'd like to see, that'd be great if you could email me or let me know, even after tonight. I mean, if you've got specifics now, you can share those with me.
You're getting our brain dump right now.
Well,
Now, when it's over, we're leaving this room.
Yeah, there's a previous staff member that brought it up a lot, and I think a lot of us agreed that the notification distance needed to be increased. I mean,
Okay.
It's just come up in our gap, I mean,
yeah, so
more times than I can count.
Well, I'm in a neighborhood right across from Town East.
Uh-huh.
If something's going over there very negative to Town East, it catches a very little part of our neighborhood. And if those people there aren't, you know, involved in the neighborhood, it won't go any further. And well, of course, I'm on the mailing list, so I usually get it, but.
But to his point, if it was something of a magnitude of another shopping mall,
Uh-huh.
so they're still required to do this 200, you know,
If it is over, the current requirements in the city is if it's over 25 acres, it goes 1,000 feet out.
And that's probably, but I don't think that Town East one, they were gonna do a carnival in the parking lot and set it up where they could do carnivals and everything in the parking lot. And I finally got City of Eastboro involved, and the other surrounding neighborhoods, of course, nobody wanted that, and fortunately it was killed, but I don't know.
So I've got some feedback. And a few things. I even learned what a dab was because of the zoning change that was literally across the creek in my backyard. I was one of 3 houses that got a notice for an event center that was gonna go in. And if I wasn't one of those 3 houses, my whole neighborhood wouldn't have been notified. And the reason why is the loophole in that, or the issue that created that, was there's neighborhood creeks, right? And so that land.
The distance.
That land is owned by a neighborhood association, which I believe you both, that you try and your teams try, but we still don't get those emails. I've reported my information 3 times. But, so there was 3 homes that were notified about that. And then there was like a dead zone. And so that all counted, right? And so getting the protest was simple. It was me and 4 neighbors. But that, it was that one letter that came out because the sign had blown down into the flood area. And so my whole history and knowledge of any of this is because of the 200-foot rule. I think it's way too small. I understand there's a cost impact, but I think that's very easy to pass on to the applicant. They're obviously making a large investment anyway, so I think it's due diligence of the government to inform their citizens of what that proposed change. And then, Becky, you always say whether you've heard from the notification area or not, but that always confuses me because sometimes it's 6 people and we're looking at a map that's, 2 square miles. And I'm like, that really isn't, that can't be the opinion of the people on that map. And so I think the onus is on the city to increase that to some level. I understand we got to balance cost, but that is a significantly too small zone to me, because 200 feet, a new billboard with the lights went up at 37th and Woodlawn that I can see from my backyard. And I was 180 feet outside of the notification zone for that. So almost twice as far away, and I can look through the trees and see that sign at night. And
Feel
so
the same way.
it's just, to me, it's just way too small with the digital age. We command operations from the other side of the world, literally, and we still put stuff in newspapers. And your example is 22 years old that you have to publish it, so.
Yeah, the case number.
Yeah, so I think it's just the sign of the times that and no disrespect to anybody, but I really just feel like every time we mention what the city's rule is and what the state's rule is, it's like checking a block that, oh, we're good, and that adds to the perception that the city may be in on some of this to allow privilege and money to make these changes without anyone ever knowing about it.
Yeah.
I understand that's not your intent, but that's perception, and perception's reality, right? So to uninformed citizens that don't go out and join things like this and learn about it and figure out what is built in the backyard and why, they never know about it until it's too late. And then the only thing you ever hear about is complaints. So, and I'm in the construction industry, that's how I pay my bills. So I'm all about construction, but like it just, I think the city can do better.
What is the burden of including renters? Because if I think about my neighborhood.
That's actually the next.
Oh, okay.
Oh, great review. Okay, so any other comments?
I'm sorry.
So my comment would just be on the data integrity piece to make sure the people actually get notified. So I would be okay with the 200-foot limit if it really got to the people who needed to know and the information. And so just trying to make sure the registered HOAs actually get the information.
But the HOA they don't have a title, right? So the email that we sent to the HOAs is a courtesy. The state law is 200 feet from people who have a title. Am I correct? That's why we have the property owners, that's why they use a title company. And that's state statute that we have to follow. So if I'm gonna develop, I want a zoning change, I have to go then to a title company and pay the fee and get that list. And then the letter goes out, an HOA isn't entitled.
Or neighborhood.
Or neighborhood, yes.
I mean, unless they own a reserve, that would be the one instance where they would show up, but even in that case, I guess sometimes there's been communication issues.
I get what you're saying, but HOAs wouldn't be part of the letter, they're part of the courtesy email.
Can we codify that so it's not courtesy and make it policy?
That, would they give me them?
Yeah.
The problem with
Well, the
that
onus
is-
would be on the neighborhood and HOAs to keep their information.
You could make it a policy, you could make it a city policy, and then it would be required that staff would do that process, but right now, it's just, we can just say, no.
Right.
But you do.
But we do,
Yeah.
I mean, we're nice folks, we try to do a good job, and we work hard at it, but yeah.
Well, that way when people come and they're upset that they didn't know, we can say, well, we tried to tell Eastridge and the email hasn't been updated in 7 years, so it went to somebody that is not with us anymore. Like, that's on Eastridge Association to make sure that when people come, they're not complaining because they didn't hear, they're complaining because they've been notified. We would tell the people.
Jim?
Yeah, kind of to follow Chris's comment, you know, you got your downtown, your city proper, and then still within the Wichita city limits are the little subdivision, HOAs and so forth that are out still spotted on land area that you can surrounded by pasture grass or whatever. So that's, you know, when that would be something to think about that, you know, I don't know how you would take and plug it, but for a radius or something ought to become maybe 1,000 feet instead of 200 feet. Because of the distance in between some of the subdivision.
And maybe that's where the Oklahoma ones were going with 10 minimum, to where it was a way to try to
Yeah.
capture, okay, we need 10 letters to go out to somebody, how big does that circle need to be? So maybe that's a way to do that.
Yeah. And I will reflect back to you kind of the notes I'm taking, just to make sure I capture all that.
I got one other thing. Not necessarily this. When we get our papers here, it says your group recommends approval. We had an issue in my neighborhood, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. It was an individual house. The owner actually came to our homeowners meeting and asked about building a double garage. We said, that's fine, and told him right at the time, of course, you can't have businesses in the neighborhood. Well, then several years later, he gets this garage and he's making furniture, he's got all kinds of stuff going on, and he tried to get the zoning changed. Some way or another, it was marked for approval, and when we went to the meeting, you had your members there, and one of them actually set up, I don't think this fits any one of the golden rules or whatever it was you had, and they finally threw it out, but it didn't. I mean, it was just, and I didn't understand where it came, who approved it,
Okay.
or who set up for approval.
Sure. Well, in the process, the planning department makes a recommendation first. And after the planning department produces a staff report, it goes to either the DAB or the NAPC, it goes to both, but which order it goes in just depends on the calendar. So, we will look at the comprehensive plan, we will look at neighborhood plans, we will also look at what decisions has the planning commission made in the past. Is kind of in the recent past, what have been some of the ideas that have come out of that? We would factor all of that in. We recently changed, I would say recently, like about 3 years ago, we changed the process that we use to evaluate staff reports. Not exactly sure how we did it before, but we instituted having a cabinet meeting in the planning department, and we get 3 or 4 folks together, and we look at each case, and we get the legal staff and other folks too, and we will debate whether or not to recommend approval, whether or not to recommend denial. We just had an NNPC last week where we had 3 cases in a single neighborhood, no, 2 cases in the neighborhood, just down the street from each other. We recommended approval on one, denial on the other, and the planning commission legitimately said, why did you recommend have different recommendations? We were able to explain it, but we'll be in that room debating a single case for more than 30 minutes to try and figure out what's the best fit for the community.
Would you still have that list of golden rules about?
Oh, yeah, golden
We
factors.
bring them every month to this meeting and have.
I guess I have to look at it. Because sometimes that's.
Trace will send you a copy.
It's laminated.
I did.
Is it okay if we keep moving?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a sense that we can talk about, I mean, we're passionate and this is a good
Yeah.
discussion, I can always come back. Okay, so who receives the notification? So again, the purpose is to notify property owners receive it, as required by state statute. All other cities that we contacted indicated that they only send it to property owners. So you got that. So the options, again, are no changes, keep it the way it is. You can't reduce it because it's by state statute. Or you can increase distribution, adding other folks like renters and people who live there. Now, in terms of numbers, kind of what does that boil down to? Well, notification list can be significant. Counties, for instance, I think they went to thousands of people because of the size of that property. And by the time you went 1,000 feet out, it hit a lot of people. We've got them where it's like 8 people. If it's just a little house and there's not much around it. So it can vary quite a bit. Again, we covered the cost, right? 175 for 10 addresses, $18 for each one over, and about $3 or $2.50 for the planning department. And then what we found is that from the title company, there are 2 major title companies that produce a list. One of them does a lot of the work, and they would actually charge an additional $2 to include the actual property address of the property that you're getting the owner address for. I know it sounds weird, but they do not include the address of the property that they're providing you the owners for. They give you the legal description. So it's $2 extra to do that. So what we looked at is we said, okay, what if we had 30 properties in the notification area, an extra $2, it's an extra $60 for the applicant. Now, we looked at some past cases and came up with an estimate, and it can vary so significantly. We just said, what's a ballpark? 20% of them are renters, let's say. So 30 properties, that's about 6 rentals, which means an additional $2.64 times 6 gets you $15.84. So this would be the additional cost to send it to renters in a hypothetical scenario of 30 houses. Sound good? Tracking with me? Okay. So, so then the question is, that's just an example of cost. I guess we can do some more, which is bigger notification areas. But the question for you all is, what are your thoughts? What are your preferences?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, because you and I have talked about this before, because people have said here, and so I did my due
Yeah,
diligence
yeah.
about renters.
Yep.
So, always tell me when I'm wrong, but I'm just gonna make a statement.
Go for it.
This is what my interpretation is.
Yeah.
I want to change the zoning.
Yep.
Right, and so do the 200 feet, right?
Yep.
And there's an apartment complex within that 200 feet.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. 'Cause-
So,
Yep.
I go to the title company and the title company just gives me property owners. So how in the world would we say, and I think it's a fantastic idea to get renters. Nobody has their contact, except the owner of the
Yeah.
apartment complex.
That's the.
Or the
caveat.
duplex or whatever it may be.
But you can send it to the address. The city has the address.
So
They
it
may
would
not
be
know
the
their
address
name.
of the property, but
Yeah.
there wouldn't be, let's say it's a duplex and there's
Apartment,
2 people, or it's apartment complex and there's 100. They have one address and that's the property owner.
No, but the city knows the address of every apartment in that complex. That's how the police know to go there.
We don't have a
It
ready
exists.
notification to it. Because what I can do is if it's condo and ownerships are separated, I can tell you for sure how many units are in there and everything. The fire department probably couldn't tell you every single unit and whatnot. But from the planning department, what we have according to GIS is an apartment complex shows up as one property and it's got one man.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
you can't communicate between the departments. I
I
don't
really
think
like
that's
to
a,
Chris's point.
that's not a hurdle
The
that really
information
stops
is
it.
in the institution. Now, whether how you gather it, it's there in the
Yeah.
institution.
I mean, to say we can't send a letter to 100 apartments because we don't know who lives in it, that's.
Well, especially
That's
when you have
exactly
neighborhoods that are becoming increasingly more rental properties.
Yeah.
And our neighborhood is an example of that. Every house around me, except for one, is a rental now.
Here's the ones that we can do the easy, is single family homes or duplex.
Sure.
Because we've got the address, and if the property address doesn't match up with the owner's address, yeah, that's probably the rental, right?
Mhm.
And we can still send it to the property address, and they're gonna get it, and we can send it to the owner, and we're gonna meet the state law. The challenge becomes in those apartment situations where it's like, who's living in unit 13, 12, 11, and how many units are there total? And again, that does come down to the systems. Is it, who's got it? Can they share it? How does that work?
As a property owner of rental properties and those tenants live in that property under my will.
Mhm.
The city or whoever doesn't get to make decision based on someone who doesn't own that property.
Well, they're not making a decision, they're just notifying.
Right, but if they could come to a DAD meeting and voice their opinion, they're registering something on the record of potentially something that I may disagree with as the property owner.
I know that came up, I heard it in another dab, and then also if we let apartment complexes be a part of the 200 feet in the protest,
Mhm.
it can greatly skew.
Right.
Cause it's such a dense
There you go.
population, so I know that came up in another district of.
This is way going down a rabbit hole, but those people are also the ones living in it.
Right.
Yeah, but they don't speak for me and I own the property.
But I can
But
go to dad's
unfortunately-
floor and talk all.
Right,
get
but if
it
they're
next
gonna speak
time.
on behalf of like being an adversary to
Well, I think we're
somebody.
talking about the protest area
Yeah,
though,
you're
so
talking
it's not making a
protest
decision, it's.
Well, there's two different, I think there's two different things going on here. Number one, so the protest is what can change council vote requirement. The protest is set by state law, 200 feet, can't be any bigger, can't be any smaller, only 200 feet and only property owners.
Yeah, so the state law will, I'm not, there's no judgment in this, I'm asking a clarifying question. The state law right now says that if it's an apartment or renters within the 200 feet in the protest area, it still just goes to the property owner.
That's right. That's right.
Which is fine. The point of the notification is that a renter gets to speak to their elected official and notify them of their opinion. Now, if it goes to the official protest or not, that's probably the owner's right. But the elected official, I believe, has a obligation to hear from the people living in that area.
That's right, whoever votes.
Now, whether they
Yeah,
are influenced.
so how do you say they should be notified, but they can't be part of the protest? And again, no judgment, I'm asking a logistical question.
Well, so if the notification area is
part of the,
increased,
because part of the process is you have to go fill out an official protest form with his department. And if I go to do that and I'm not the registered property owner,
Then
then
it won't count.
then it won't
You
count.
can submit it and it won't be a valid.
but your voice can still be heard.
But your
you would
voice
still
is
know.
still heard. Yeah,
I just want to know the logistics about.
because I took a stack of like 70 official protest forms down there. And they went through one by one. And it was like, this one will be read and heard. It doesn't count. This one counts. This one doesn't. So that process exists already. So the owner does get that right. But the elected official still gets to hear from everyone in their zone.
And or the DAB if they're making a zoning.
Or,
decision.
yeah, I think it's important.
Because you vote by your address. So whether I'm a property owner or not, I get to vote by my address.
I vote my school board and everything else by where I live, whether I own it or not. So
It's not
I mean,
skewing.
to say you have to own the property to get a voice, I think that's not what we're after.
And then you're not messing with the protest area, you're only increasing the number of
Awareness.
people that know. Because renters can be affected by something that they have no control over, and their only recourse is to move.
Which
So
then
I
could
think,
negatively
I
affect the
think people
property.
need to know that that's a, you know, that property is not desirable to live in anymore because there's a Topgolf in your backyard or whatever. Not that it isn't, they're very love, but.
But in the case of a lot of our out-of-state owners who may not pay attention, you may want your renter to be able to let you know, hey, something's going on here, and you may not be paying attention that is happening where your property is, and it could adversely affect you. So that kind of communication, that's just kind of like checking, that doing your due diligence and making sure everybody involved or affected is notified.
Anything that increases civic engagement, I think is a positive. I think weighing the budgetary concerns is valid, but it sounds like it's not adding massive amounts. Like if you do 1,000 feet, obviously, $30,000 is too much. But if you aren't affecting the protest area, you're only affecting the notification area, it seems like apartments may be the only. So maybe we come up with a caveat for apartments where there's notification put out that isn't necessarily their address, where you require the property owner to sign an affidavit that they notified their renters or something. I don't know.
And in your example, are we really pushing back because of $15?
We'll go back to the slide that had, because there was one example where it's $500 and 7,000 or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that was a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay, and that one, I can certainly go back to that, but that one is on, how far out, right, how far the distance is. So I'm trying to segment these so that we get, because it's easy to get these kind of mixed and going, so I'm happy to go back after we're done with the.
This is just notification.
This is just, yeah. should-
Yeah,
who
I mean,
should
are
receive
you
the
really
notice?
pushing back off of an approximate $15?
Well, it's $50 for the department and $60 for the applicant.
I
That's
know,
what we
but
anticipate.
it costs to you all to.
Yeah.
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 $15.
Well, I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just saying it's really costs.
But I would say too, I mean, if you wanna change the city zone, like, why can't they pay that? I mean, this isn't really property rights, this is, you're paying to have the city assess if something is changed. I don't know why
And some,
I don't know why the city should.
some zoning changes do have the opportunity to very negatively affect neighborhoods,
That's right.
very negatively.
It's been a good discussion, should we carry on to the next one, and then we can come back, how's that sound?
You good, just,
Yeah, I know, Scott,
I'm
you're so
ready to go.
diplomatic.
Okay, so the notification languages, so there was a discussion when this came before the city council, and there was an, individual members. I remember at least one expressed an interest in looking into whether or not, the letters could be provided in Spanish, Vietnamese. So we looked into that, and legal counsel looked at it and said, you know, it's not advisable at this time. And the reason why is because of equal protection clauses, and so what if we did translate it and sent it out and we got something wrong, or we didn't translate it correctly, or something, whatever happened, then it could cause all kinds of ramifications to the case because of equal protection and providing the person with the same legal notice as what other folks get. We're trying to make sure everything is done equally and everyone has the same assurances. So that's why city legal at this time is probably. Yeah. Wait,
I don't know.
that's good, that's a whole other topic.
How many languages can you speak?
So we said, all right, okay, so let's see what other jurisdictions do, and we contacted them, none of them sent it out at any of the legal notice for zoning and other information. So,
I think
Well,
most
we
people
can
can
translate.
find people that can translate it.
Well, if we,
Well, how do they even know, hey, this is important, they can.
it's from the city of Wichita, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the letter says city of Wichita.
It does.
You think they'll send 3 letters there?
Well, no, I mean, I totally understand this, and I think it would be nice to have, I mean, there's like 15 languages spoken in my neighborhood, and not everybody's gonna get a letter in their language, unfortunately, as much as I would love that. I think that, if we increase the notification area or include renters, that more people will know and they'll get that information.
Okay. Letter content, so we are working, there was a desire expressed to make them easier and simpler and easier to understand. Personally, I can certainly understand that. This is our current letter. I'm sorry you can't see it very well, but you can see it's quite lengthy. It has like this official title. It's got all the zoning districts are listed in it. I'm not exactly certain how that helps anyone, but here's a map. And there's just a lot of information in there. So what we've done is we've cut it down to what we think are 3, so it'd be a map sheet, a description of what's being requested and what it is and who to contact. I wish I had an example with you. I'll have to send it as a follow-up.
That sounds
to this.
good.
So, but just in general, just kind of getting thoughts on it. So.
When I was part of the area and we got one, it was the call
Yeah.
I recused myself from everything, but I remember my husband was like, what? This, and I'm like, oh, let me explain it to you, but I mean, he's a smart guy, right? Business,
Very.
but so it is, I like the street.
I do too, send
So
it.
thank you.
I agree.
Yeah.
If they have questions, they can call you.
Yes.
That's simple.
Yes.
Not everyone speaks our own language. the city.
Sometimes it looks like you're making it, not you, but entities making these way more complicated to encourage you not to pay attention.
I
It's not, but I get
I
it.
try and be generous. What I think has happened is that someone, something happened and they're like, oh, we ought to include that in the letter. And then 2 years later, something else happens. Oh, we need to add that. And pretty soon you end up with a school bus worth of.
I think you're right to simplify it, because people will get definitely overwhelmed by too much information.
And a phone number.
Sure.
And phone
Yeah,
number.
it clearly needs to say who to contact with questions, email, phone. Becky's cell phone.
Which I give up.
Cell phone.
Just forever.
I thought I could find it. Yeah.
Okay, yes, and then that's overall. So if I could just take a moment to reflect on what I've heard and just make sure that I got this.
Moment.
We bet you do. We bet you got
Okay,
it.
there we go. All right, never mind. So we're good. I'll come back if I got any questions. So with that, I'll sit down.
Well, thank you.
No, I want to say thank you, Scott, and I also want to thank this district advisory board, and I tell the community engagement story of Chris very often. He and I had communication because of his concern, he came to city council meeting, I said, you're unfortunately not gonna get to speak, you're gonna have to sit here a long time. But I was so impressed with his tenacity that I met with him and asked him to be on the deck, right? And he's right, you might not have come to this if it were not for that, so I appreciate your feedback, I appreciate your thoughts. The pushback, like raising the heat is how we make things better, so I genuinely mean thank you.
Oh, sorry, I do have a question. Is the DAB on that letter, like, where to come if they wanna?
Yeah, they are.
And MAPC.
Yeah, and part of our, I'm having a flashback because during the COVID, we didn't know when DABs were meeting, so we were putting some general language in. I'm trying to recall whether or not I think we put the specific date nowadays.
Thank you, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay.
Thank
all.
you, Scott, thank you,
Yeah.
get on safely. Okay, one quick thing and then an announcement. So the next thing, item number 12, Teresa, are you still okay? District 2 advisory report. Teresa and I met with legal. There was some question of if we had to meet at 6:30, if we could change the time. Other devs meet at 6. Like tonight, it's gonna be 9 o'clock, right? But I also don't want it to be a burden if people have a hard time getting here by 6:30 because they need to go home and get, family members dinner, whatever. So we're gonna do this the good old, and I asked you last month to kind of think about it. We're gonna do this the, good old democratic way, and we're gonna vote on it. And so that way it's fair and it's not just me deciding or, the loudest voice, which usually were me. But so I would entertain any discussion, if somebody wants to make a motion, we can make a motion and then have discussion, but we can, according to state, with the city ordinance, move the meetings to 6 if that's something you're interested in.
I think that that's a great idea to move it to 6, because it aligns it with the rest, and I would leave out all of the Rockwell Branch Library, because we discussed briefly about potentially moving it to Austin or somewhere else where you could, that's actually in the district, but.
Yeah,
I
that
like
was
this-
just for our kind of.
Oh, I know, that way, if we're meeting somewhere else, like, this is close for me, but it might be really far for somebody else, so.
And we're gonna have to relocate in a few months when they do the renovations here. Teresa and I are meeting with the fire department and taking a tour to see if the technology can accommodate it. That's one of our biggest concerns now, because we have to have technology for people who can't join in person. So is that a motion to move it to 6?
I was just giving my discussion, I will make a motion if somebody else is having to say.
John?
I will make a motion.
Okay.
6 o'clock.
Okay,
Yeah, because that's why I was late tonight. I went home and got caught.
I will second that.
You're late, so whatever.
okay. So we have a motion to move it to 6 and a second. Is there a discussion? I think Stephanie.
Oh, we both seconded.
That's why I was late.
You have comments? Yes, sir.
There was pizza and pop is on.
The motion maker has to bring pizza and pop every week. Yeah, be good. So any other discussion on moving till 6? Okay, I will call the vote. All those in favor of having our district advisory morning meeting 6,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, Teresa, will you update the invites for all of us? So that we will, and staff as well. Okay, before we go, really quick, I have something about an event that we shall participate in, but I'm gonna give it to Teresa, just have her email it out. So look for an email from Teresa, please, about Story Walk with the libraries, cool thing to get involved in. Next month's meeting, the District Advisory Board meeting on March 11th. I will not be able to attend. I will be in Washington DC for the National League of Cities Conference and then doing Hill visits with Congressman Estes and Senators Marshall and Moran. Every March this happens. And I would say I would join remotely, but I can't guarantee it. So I have asked him if he will chair the meeting in March. And so Teresa and I will meet with him and make sure that he's prepared. Teresa will obviously be here to provide any guidance. Yes.
So there's nothing to vote on as far as zoning. or
We are
anything.
checking right now, and if the meeting can be canceled, if there's no zoning cases, it will be canceled. If not, Tim will chair.
Okay,
Okay.
that sounds
That's
like a
the
win.
week of,
So-
spring break.
Oh, it is.
Most school districts are in.
We're trying to see, we want to move it a week. We're working, but more to come. So next on the agenda, I know you all don't want to do it. I know you don't want to do it, but
Let's do it.
is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, let's do it.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make that-
Sam, is there a second? Is there a second? Thank you, Tracy.
second
Say- All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Anyone opposed, say bye. I won't see you next month, probably, but I'll miss you all. Thank you for your service.
But we're starting a new time.